Now, next is Sandra Stewart, 25 years with public health, but I don't think she was able to make it to court today. But she's given us 25 years. She said the time has really flown by. She said, I enjoy working with the people. She's a nutritionist, and she says, I enjoy very much working with children and mothers to kind of work with them on diets and different things that happen along the way. So as you see her, please congratulate Sandra for the 25 years of service that she's given to the residents of Tarrant County. Now, the last one is Judge Gary Ritchie, and he wasn't going to be able to make it down here today, but as you see him, please thank Judge Ritchie for the 35 years of service that he's given at Tarrant County. Collectively, 515 years of service. We again want to thank you. It's just a small expression, but it's very heartfelt, and we cannot begin to tell you what a difference you make in not only the people who work here and work with you, but with the citizens throughout Tarrant County in whatever points in their life they are when you encounter them. Because that's what I hear over and over again, is the respect that you have for them regardless of where they are when you encounter them. And I think that makes a tremendous difference. Refreshments back in 504C. You better hurry because I don't see Wilder, which means he's already back there. So head back there. Again, congratulations, and thank you very much for your service.
Approval. Second.
We have a motion second to approve the consent agenda. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. There comes Beecham.
Who's that club?
They played some high school team. We have a couple of public hearings this morning.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the court, we're requesting that the court do the following. Conduct a second, which will be the final public hearing regarding tax year 2013 tax rate for Tarrant County government, and to also announce that the date, time, and place of the vote on the tax rate, which will be as follows. The vote will be taken September 10th, 2013 at 10 o'clock in the morning. It will be at the Tarrant County Administration Building, 100 East Weatherford Street in Fort Worth, Texas. Our benchmark tax rates for tax year 2013, the effective tax rate is .263367 per $100 valuation. The rollback tax rate is going to be .287324 per $100 evaluation. Our current tax rate, which is .264, and our proposed tax rate is .264 per $100 valuation.
At this time, I will open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone here wishing to speak to this matter. There appearing to be none, then I will close the public hearing, and I don't believe there's any action to be taken at this time.
Not at this time, Your Honor. Members of the court, we would like to next go to item 2 under the public hearing. We're requesting that the court do the following, or conduct the following: conduct a public hearing regarding tax year 2013 as relates to the Tarrant County Hospital District. Announce the date, time, place of the vote of the tax rate, which is as follows. The tax rate will be set September 10th, 2013 at 10 a.m. in the morning. It will be held at the Tarrant County Administration Building, 100 East Weatherford Street in Fort Worth, Texas. Our benchmark rates for the hospital district for tax year 2013 are as follows. The effective tax rate will be .227527 per $100 valuation. The rollback rate will be .246767 per $100 valuation. The district's current tax rate is .227897, and the proposed tax rate, which will be the same as the current tax rate, will be .227897 per $100 valuation.
I will open the public hearing at this time and ask if anyone wishing to speak would come forward. There appearing to be none, then I will close the public hearing, and again, I don't believe there's any action to take at this time.
That's correct. Thank you, Your Honor.
So next week, we'll be voting on Tarrant County Hospital District, and the Emergency Service District's tax rates.
Plus the budgets for those three entities also.
Okay.
Members of the Court, we can now go to the administrator's section. As we previously noted, item 1 will be held. We will now move to item number 2. We're requesting that the Commissioners' Court adopt an order regarding the disbursement of funds collected under Section 22.2031 of the Texas Government Code on behalf of the Second Court of Appeals, and authorize the county auditor to fund to forward the fund balance as of August 31st, 2013 of the Appellate Judicial System Fund to the Second Court of Appeals.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Members of the Court, if we can go to item number 3, we're requesting that the Court approve a resolution which relates to tax-exempt financing facilitated by the Manville Education Facilities Corporation in the maximum principal amount of $8 million for the benefit of Southwest Christian Schools for certain educational facilities which are located in Tarrant County. This is money which will be issued, or this debt will be issued by Manville. It does not require our approval to issue the debt. However, there is a requirement because monies from this debt will be spent in Tarrant County, and that the Commissioners' Court approve that expenditure.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Members of the Court, if we could go to item number 4, we're requesting that the Commissioners' Court approve interim funding for the continuation of the DA's bilingual victim assistance program in the amount of $10,000.
Move for approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Members of the Court, on item number 5, we're requesting that the Court accept a grant award from TxDOT as it relates to the DA's DWI No Refusal Initiative.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Do we have any information on how that went over the weekend?
I haven't heard.
We'll make sure we come back with a report on that to the Court. Of course, this particular grant actually funds it for next year also.
I see.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Finally, members of the Court, on item number 6, we're requesting that the Court consider and approve an out-of-state travel request and an exception to the travel policy for an employee of County Criminal Court number 4.
Move for approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Tidwell?
We have 2 items that we're asking the Court to consider this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
The first one is to receive and file the auditor's report of the tax office ad valorem refund review. Just working with the tax office to improve their processes. They do a good job, but had some suggestions.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And the other item is to ask the Court, if you may remember, back in April, the Court, we awarded the depository bid to J.P. Morgan Chase. We've been in the process of working through the contractual terms and agreements. So today we have both the public funds depository contract, the depository contract for the registry funds held by the county clerk, and the depository contract for the registry funds held by the district clerk. Worked with Mr. Wilder and Ms. Garcia, and we're all in agreement for our respective contracts and would ask the Court to approve all 3 of those contracts.
Move for approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Ms. Clem?
Move to receive and file personnel agenda.
Second.
We have a motion is second. Receive and file personnel agenda. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Good morning, and thank you. We have two additional items for the court. The second item, we're asking the court to approve a waiver of terminal benefits for the county clerk's office. Criminal court supervisor retired on August the 23rd with 392 vacation hours. The county clerk is requesting a waiver of 312 vacation hours effective September 9th. We're estimating the general, or the impact to the general fund to be approximately $7,600, excluding fringe benefits.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And our third item, we're asking the court to approve a revision to the table of organization to reclassify the emergency management coordinator position in the county clerk's, in the county administrator's office. This position was evaluated by the Job Evaluation Committee, and they're recommending that we administer the position at a pay grade 74. The cost of the reclass will be entirely offset by savings that we've experienced. This job has been vacant since late April. We're asking that the reclass be approved effective September 4.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brewer? Good morning.
Good morning.
Public Health has one item for your approval. This is the fiscal year 2014 fee schedule.
Move for approval.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Beecham?
Which high school was it?
You know, it was probably one of those in Louisiana because they're a little bit tougher than the ones over in Arkansas. Go right ahead, Jack.
We play a better high school team this week, though.
Who do you play
Coached by
this week?
Samford, coached by Pat Sullivan, one of TCU's previous coaches. Had they beat you, would that be a frogging or a flogging?
I never thought about it, so I wouldn't know.
We do have three items for your consideration this morning. Our first item is a bid award recommendation for RFQ 2013-078 for our pharmacist in charge for the health department. Recommendation be to award to Marcella Cropper in the amount of $21,124, $21,125, I'm sorry. We are also seeking a contract approval.
A little rattled here this morning?
It's Tuesday after a holiday.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Our second item is a bid award recommendation for bid 2013-121, it's an annual contract for temporary general labor for facilities management. The recommendation be to award a per enterprise basis, selecting as our primary vendor Lane Staffing, secondary vendor ACBMS, and the alternate vendor Global Employment Solutions.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And our last item is also a bid award recommendation for bid number 2013-124, it's our annual contract for aggregate road surface treatment for use by all our precincts. Recommendation would be to award on a per enterprise basis and a discount from the list price, awarding to the 5 primary vendors as shown in the court communique.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Commissioner Brooks?
Mr. Wright, we finally got this straight. Then I move approval of, 9M, 1A and B?
Yes, sir.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Are there any appointments today? Being none, then you have before you the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have two items to bring to the court at this time. The first one concerns public health updates. Dr. Kurian is here to address the court as relates to the West Nile virus.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Florian.
Last week, 168 mosquito samples were tested in our public health lab. 2 of those tested positive for West Nile virus. One of them was from the city of Fort Worth. This was the first specimen for the city of Fort Worth that tested positive this season. The second specimen was from the city of Arlington. So this brings the total number of positives in Arlington to 6. 1 being tested at the public health lab, 5 were tested by the private vendors. And 3 of those 5 tested positive last week for the city of Arlington. In response to the positive samples, City of Arlington had completed ground spraying in these locations on this past Sunday and Monday. So total number of samples that tested positive this season for West Nile virus is 20, 8 from the City of Grapevine, 6 from Arlington, 2 from Pantego, 1 from White Settlement, 2 from Granbury, and 1 from City of Fort Worth.
Where was the one in Fort Worth?
One in Fort Worth, it was Precinct 1 location. I think it was Statler Road. It's difficult to explain without a map, but the exact location was, I'll get back to you on that. It was a Precinct 1 location.
Wasn't Peden. Peden's not in Fort Worth.
Thank you very much.
Okay. We continue to have 2 human cases, one from Fort Worth and one from Keller.
What a difference a year makes.
Say that
Absolutely.
one more time, Dr. Kurian.
2 human cases
2
this
human
season,
cases,
one
yeah.
from Fort Worth and one from Keller. And Keller does not have a West Nile virus positive mosquito sample this season. So.
The one from Fort Worth, was it in the northern part of Fort Worth? Or you
Again,
Near Keller?
near.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it was the one.
No,
that-
it wasn't near Keller. We did look at that. It was certainly not near Keller. So I can get that location and the positive sample locations back to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Dr. Kurian, you might tell the court, now we're sitting here in September, and so there's going to come a time when this will decrease. It never goes away, but what are the most active months, and when should we expect some type of slowdown in this?
Typically, West Nile virus infections, they start anywhere from April to September, early October. Historically, here in Tarrant County, we've seen few samples positive even in the months of November and December. Last year, our last case onset was on 11/15 in November. Our positive samples, again, week 40 of last year, we had our 85th West Nile virus positive sample. However, we continue to see some, trickling of these cases and positive samples every year, all the way up to November, December sometimes. So, but majority of the cases historically have been reported towards the last week of July or first 2 weeks of August. So
After the rain we had this weekend, it would be well for everybody to go out, empty out standing water. And
absolutely.
remember to go back and take care of those
Yeah.
things that we've been stressing on.
Yeah, especially
all
after
summer.
the rain, we tend to see a decline in the mosquito pools, or mosquito samples, or decline in the mosquito numbers. But with the standing water, they tend to come on back. So it's important to go out, like the judge said, go out and drain those standing water sites. But if you look at the historical data, we are on the downward decline. We have passed the hump that we see last week of July or first 2 weeks of August.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to have a measles report.
Yeah, I'm also going to go ahead and.
We had not anticipated having a measles report unless you would like to ask any questions.
Just what's the status?
We continue to have 16 cases, no additional cases reported yet. And like I reported last week, if we don't have any new cases by the second week of September, we can pretty much conclude that this cluster investigation is over with.
Okay, so we're waiting one more week, and then we'll feel
Yes,
pretty good about it.
we do, however, have few suspects we are following on, but we are cautiously optimistic that we may not have any more new cases to report. And if that continues till the second week of September, this cluster is done with.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Members of the court, we can now move to item B, which is the FY14 budget issue. I believe we have a few more issues that we need to talk to the court about.
There's a few pending items left to discuss and wrap up before we approve the budget next week. First of all, shown on your screen there, and I'm sorry I didn't make any paper copies today. Is it on your screen?
Yes, it is.
Okay, there's just a few adjustments that we've been watching regarding our self-insurance funds. They're listed there on your screen. An adjustment out of workers' comp for self-insurance into group insurance for retirees and also into our self-insurance for property and liability. And the budget office is recommending the approval of those three
Will
items.
those get us to the point where our reserves are in line with what we,
That's what we're attempting.
okay,
Correct.
okay.
And, you know, we had an anomaly workers' comp year in 2012. It was very high compared to the previous years. It's back down this fiscal year.
Okay.
And plus, we've also installed or implemented a new network, which is having a very positive impact also. So could I have a motion on those three, please?
Move approval.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And then next, we have failed to bring up the topic of merit discussion for the non-law enforcement employees. And HR is prepared to answer any questions that you might have, and along with some recommendations. And as you might recall, we developed a 3% merit pool for the non-law enforcement employees with no further information provided other than the mechanism for the funding.
So do you want us to have a discussion, or do you want to make recommendations and then us have a discussion?
That's up to you.
Why don't you make recommendations and then we'll have
Okay.
a discussion?
Well, I think we've talked about a 3% merit pool. This would work pretty much the same way it has in the past year. I guess it was the last time we had it last year, and it was a couple of years before that. So we can go ahead and do that again. That's what's in the budget, as Debbie mentioned. The question, I think, becomes the structure adjustments for non-law enforcement, if we have a 2% or a 3% structure adjustment. As you'll recall, Hay presented a 2% recommendation. We, to some degree, are leaning towards 3% for a couple of reasons. One, we're seeing that salaries generally across the country are increasing by 3 to 3.2%. We're also seeing, especially in our non-exempt group, a couple, that one is behind by about 3.5%. So we would like to see that structure go up a little more than 2%. And generally, it's a little bit easier to administer because we don't have to deal with lump sums under a 3% situation as opposed to 2%. You might recall when we do lump sums, those really end up being the difference between the structure adjustments for maxed out employees and merit increases. So if we have a 3% merit, we would end up with 1% lump sums should we give a 2% structure adjustment.
So let me ask a question first, and then.
Sure.
If we give the 3%, it would not impact the budget this year because of the fact that we already had built in a 3% lump sum for those that were at max. The ones that are at max, and I'm assuming that this probably would be the case, they would get it, they would probably still get the 3%. Under a merit, could they get more than 3%, get the 3% structure, and then get the other in a lump sum?
No.
It's just 3% max.
Correct.
But if they were, for whatever reason, in that rarity that they scored below a 3 or a 2.95, you've got me on this one, then they would not get any increase at that point.
Right.
Okay. If it's a merit. So I guess from my perspective, I don't have a problem with going with the 3%.
I'll make that motion.
A second.
We have a motion and a second to approve a 3% structure for non-law enforcement and a 3% merit for non-law enforcement.
And just to be clear, that 3% structure would be effective January 1st as opposed to October 1st as it has been in some past years. That's
Okay.
what's in the budget currently.
Any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
The last are the two, well, I'm going to skip. Obviously, I can't talk and do things at the same time. Let's move down to County Criminal Court number 5. As you know, we've been discussing the fact that they potentially are going to lose some grant funding come this, well, actually, September 1st. We're still waiting to hear the outcome of that grant award, and this has to do with family violence. After talking to Judge Cummings and her employee who's over this program, looking at what's already in her budget, we've been subsidizing this operation by about $150,000 to $60,000 a year on top of the $80,000 grant they've been getting. By looking at their budget and what their actual expenses are and the fact that they're planning on potentially implementing as a fee structure, I think we're okay. So there's no really action that's required on this one. Now it's just sit back and wait to see if we get the grant or not.
Okay.
Okay, so
So if we don't get the grant, we're going to hopefully make it up with fees. If we do get the grant, then our 160 is going to be reduced by whatever fees we get.
No, it'll still be whatever we've got, well,
Are we implementing a fee schedule?
to the best of my knowledge, yes.
So then, one way or other, we're going to end up, if you're telling me, well, I mean,
There's still some margin to make up. We've been getting.
well, I know there's still margin to make
We-
up, but at least we're going to be reducing the 160 that you previously had budgeted because we're going to be getting fees.
Actually, the fees are going to go toward the lost funds, the lost grant funds.
Well, what if we don't lose them?
Then there's a discussion on whether we implement the fees or not. Because in the grant world, if we implement the fees, then program income goes first, is spent first, and the grant fund's second. So, in essence, that would reduce the grant in itself.
Okay? So I think I understand. So if we get the grant, no fees. If we don't get the grant, fees.
that's correct.
And you're okay with going forward because you feel like that the fees, if we lose the grant, that the fees will pretty much offset what the grant had been.
Yes.
Do we have any idea what the amount of the fee would have to be to offset the lost revenue from the grant if we don't get it?
We don't have much choice in what the fee is, you know, it will be applied under CSCD guidelines, and I'm sorry, I didn't specifically ask what the monthly fee was I mean, I just don't know the answer to that question. But we don't have any flexibility, say in a high or low. I mean, it will be the same as charged to all programs within the CSCD structure.
And of course, what we're going to do, we'll monitor the program to make sure that there's adequate funding to have this program. So just say we don't believe that it needs to be placed in the FY14 budget at this time. And so what we're recommending
Take no action.
Right.
No, we're going to recommend that we approve the County Criminal Court number 5 budget with the exception of that one position.
Move approval.
Wait a minute. There's.
We
But the two of y'all are both sending different signals every time she says yes, you say no.
We don't have to take any other action as it relates to this particular thing, but we have yet to vote on their budget. So that's the action that we need
And
to
it
take.
is as recommended and presented to the court back during the budget hearings.
So we're simply passing the budget request.
Correct.
With the one new position?
No.
No,
No, without the one new position. That's correct.
as presented.
Is that your motion?
That's
Second.
my motion.
We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, so let's go back up to the district attorney's office then. Discussion has been centered around two pending positions, one being a CPS attorney, and the other being a crime analyst. If you remember in the budget, we recommended on the CPS attorney that we eliminate an economic crimes position. Now, I am recommending the funding of the CPS attorney. I've had a great deal of discussions with our Child Protective Services Board, the Department of Regulatory and Protective Services, as well as Judge Boyd at the juvenile court. The real underlying issue regarding this position is that the state is about to add 5 conservatorship units to Tarrant County, which will put an additional burden on not only this unit, but of course our juvenile court. The flip side of funding this position is that every time we fund an attorney position, then Department of Regulatory and Protective Services, and I'm probably saying those words a little backwards, also funds or provides a legal assistant. My discussions with them is they have found an avenue to provide that legal assistant, but I want to make it clear it is one of the 34 positions that Tarrant County currently funds for that state operation. So the mix is in the mill. They can provide the clerical and support for an additional attorney position, and we are recommending this, barring the fact that the original recommendation will be unsuccessful to eliminate the economic crimes position.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
The last one is the crime analyst, and I'll leave that in your hands.
That's the one where is that not the one where the cities have been
The
providing
city of Fort
this?
Worth has, correct.
And I have not been able to come up with an answer from
I
the
haven't
city.
either.
I talked to the mayor, but I still haven't been able to talk to the police chief. And quite frankly, I think that the timing on this is that we should do it. We've got to have somebody over there to schedule these people to witness as witnesses and what have you when they're having their court cases. And without Fort Worth's participation, we're sort of helpless. And they've got a lot of cases in our courts.
I sure wish that we could. I mean, I understand. I was going to try to also get a hold of.
Well, can we leave this then in abeyance until next week? Let's go one more.
Well, we're going to have to pass a budget next week, but I would agree. I would like to do that and leave it in abeyance until.
Can we approve it and put it in non-designated?
What I'd rather do is not approve it and just know that if we need it, we'll go get it out undesignated.
Correct.
I'd rather not approve it as well.
I don't have a meeting with Arlington until next week.
Well, it's my understanding that Arlington still furnishes officers twice a week, 2 days a week.
No, I think they did.
Somebody from the DA's office speak to that?
Doesn't look like they can. Let's see if
Well, that's what I was told by the DA.
let's not approve it. Let's see if we can't again give it a shot this week, and
All right.
and then see what we can do, and then go from there.
Well, if we get out of the meeting in time today, I'll call the chief again.
Okay. I'm telling you, we got the over and under here.
Thank you. You better
That's
bet
really
on
all
it.
I have, just a couple of quick FYIs. We re-looked at our merit calculations, and basically for the non-law enforcement employees, that total pool went down a whopping $11,000. Our law enforcement adjustment, as we stated in the beginning, was understated by about $8,000. So by and large, we came around somewhere $3,000 ahead. Now, we did get some additional revenue estimate information from the auditor's office on Friday, and that information is shown here. Well, first of all, was the additional tax roll information. We get a September 1st supplemental tax roll, and we picked up $395,079 out of that. We made a small adjustment to debt service in the interest earnings to balance that fund. The auditor's office revenue increases were from indigent defense in the amount of $460,000, and an increase in cash carry forward projection of $2.4 million. Now, basically, all of this will go into undesignated, and part of the reason for that also is that the last two items are clearly one-time shots. They are not reoccurring. The indigent defense, and Judge Whitley might want to explain that. They held some of those funds in abeyance during this current year, so they're kind of doubling up their allocations for next fiscal year, but that will not reoccur in fiscal 15.
Yeah, what that represents is that, if you'll recall, the legislature has restricted what we could disperse, even though the revenues were dedicated to the indigent defense, and so we had about 15, could be a little bit more than that, but about $15 million that at the end of this legislative session, they released and said you can now spend it. So we're going to wait until we get all of the 13 reports in. We will distribute that money in early December as a one-time special distribution of we think it'll be somewhere between $15 and $17 million. And that should mean that, we should get a pretty good sized share of that from that standpoint. So that's when she talks about one time. I think that 460 is a conservative estimate, but we'll know for sure December the 5th. No, yeah. Or no, it's December. It's the following week, December the 12th. We'll approve that final formula for distribution. And what again, where I would say from looking at this, remember, we've talked about in early December, late November, early December, coming together, and we'll have our cash carry forwards will be a confirmed number at that point in time. And so we'll know where we stand with regards to our reserves. You'll recall last year we did some stuff on our unfunded liability. We can look at that, and if we take into account our new reserve policies, and we can determine at that point in time whether or not we feel like we could do something with some extra cash, if we have extra cash at that time.
Are these the only items we're going to consider?
Yes, sir.
I just don't want us to get into a bind as far as what the sheriff had requested on bailiffs. Right now, I'm still following up on the report, and there's still 10 vacancies on the report that have not been filled. But once he gets those filled, he had asked for several more bailiffs because of being short on them. We may have to also go back to the bucket to help him out on bailiffs.
I hear what you're saying there, and I remember I think you wanted 3 every 6 months for at least up to a total of about 15 to 18.
I think that's right, and I think that's a lot, but I just think that we need to keep that in mind.
And then
we
again,
may have to go back to the budget.
One of the things that I have gone over and met with the judges, I've asked Greg Schugert to work with them about the possibility of creating at least some sort of a scheduling pool with those judges that have their own bailiffs to try to cut down on the requests. And I think they're working diligently on trying to do that.
Really?
The one thing, and they talked about that, and I think they realize that maybe there's something they can do and can help in that process. I would also say that one of the things that I think we may have to consider is putting a security guard. The sheriff took the guard away from the parking garage down there, and I do believe that that's one of the more vulnerable.
At the criminal courts building?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that may be one of the more vulnerable spots, and so if that spot has continued to be vacant, then we may have to try to do something on that, because I'm afraid that something could happen down there, and that would not be good.
And Commissioner Johnson, last week, I don't believe you were here, but the court basically said they were not going to consider the 3 positions anymore. However, they said that the court indicated that they were going to allow the sheriff to fill those vacancies and only consume 120 hours of terminal leave. That way, there should be a continuous effort by the sheriff's department to fill those positions and not have to wait for any type of leave balances to burn off.
Is that the reason for the drag on those 10 positions now?
Sometimes, but not always.
Do we know?
I mean,
certainly that is an issue at times, Commissioner. We have worked very closely with the Sheriff's Department over the past year. We've really stepped up our recruitment efforts. We've reached out to a lot of organizations that have veterans who are searching for work. And so I think we've made some strides, but it's like 2 steps forward and 1 back. I mean, we'll get people in the pipeline, and then people fall out for various reasons. Some don't pass the criminal background checks. There are a variety of different reasons. So it's just an ongoing effort, and we're always looking for ways to reach out to pools of applicants that we've not yet touched. So it's a struggle, and the terminal benefits issue, I think, is just a small part of it.
Let me ask another question. Most of the folks who go into the bailiff's area, is that their first job in the Sheriff's Department, or are they, because, most of the time when I talk with folks, most of the time when they start with the Sheriff's Department, they start off in confinement.
I think that's true.
And so it surprises me a little bit on the vacancies, because I just get the feeling that you start in confinement, and then most people are looking, or a lot of folks look to move from confinement into other areas, and so it surprises me a little bit that.
Of course, it's the difference too, you're not required to be a certified peace officer when you're in confinement, so it's a matter of whether you walk into that job with those credentials or you earn them while you're also working in the jail, earn them on your own. I mean, there have been several new hires from outside of our organization, as well as the few internal transfers, like from patrol.
But more transfers into those positions than new hires.
About equal.
Really?
Here's a position that's been vacant since June 26th that only had 23 hours of terminal benefits. So, but there's some that had a large number of terminal benefits, so it's mixed.
The one right below it, June 30th, had 125 hours, and it's still vacant. There's one on August 13th that's vacant, 0 hours, and August the 16th, vacant, 8 hours.
And of course, the flip side of the coin is there are some people who have accrued more than the maximum payoff amount of 400 hours. So they may be taking a large amount of time off prior to their termination date, trying to use what they've accumulated over the maximum payout. I mean, I saw one that was excessive.
Okay, thank y'all.
That's all we have at this time, Your Honor.
This time we will recess and proceed to our closed meeting to discuss items exempted under Section 551.071, 072, 074, 076, and 087 of the Texas Government Code.
Closest from here to that.
One of the Republicans on my left and Democrats on my right.
But I'm in the, I'm sitting on the bank. with
You
my
said
feet
Democrats
dangling
like
off this bank.
plural.
I'm sitting up about this high and my feet dangling. This one old boy sees this big gator floating out there.
Okay, I got you.
Tips in the fire out of fish with two rotten reels. And I looked over.
Is the mic on?
Yeah.
Yes, the mic
Actually,
is on.
it is. 30 foot up on the bank. I said, hell with them gators.
Yeah.
Having returned from our closed session, we'll now proceed with our work session.
Very good. Let me do some introductions, and I'll kind of lead us into this, and then I'll turn it over to Jack. First of all, let me introduce Jack Steele. Jack is an executive and the executive director of a firm called Active Strategies. It's a company that we have contracted with. Active Strategies is actually a unit of a much larger organization called the Advisory Board, who's been involved in strategic planning and training in different areas within the public sector for the last 30-some-odd years. You might recall that as we talked about doing a more comprehensive strategic planning approach, we passed a court order or ordinance which was entitled Governmental Results. And Jack and his firm have worked extensively with Miami-Dade County in an area that has an ordinance very similar to the one that we passed. This is a process that is going to be spanned over probably several months, this strategic planning element. I believe that today what we're looking at is simply to do an intro. We've invited those individuals who will be impacted. There's more that will be impacted besides those in the room. We are streaming live, so we have some of our department heads that are watching this over our live stream. And so, anyway, Jack is going to lead us through an introductory piece on this. Our goal today, and Jack can expound on it, but especially to give the court an overview as to how we would like to move, or we think we want to move forward on this, but more importantly, to get your input on if you see areas that you think we need to delve more heavily into, areas that we should basically not delve as heavily into, or any of the processes. One of the things when we talked with Jack and Active Strategies was that we heard the court say that you wanted to involve all the various elected officials and appointed officials as well as senior department heads. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we see that may be happening today. And once again, we seek your input. Jack, if you are ready to start your process, then simply begin.
Okay. Well, I forgot I had a microphone on. Okay. Did anybody else, any of the commissioners want to add anything, ask any questions, help set the tone? No? Yes?
Hit them and move.
Keep moving, huh? Okay. So I wanted to give you a view of the process so that you had some context and could ask questions and may even make suggestions if you want to as to how we could improve the process. And the process would be of what kind of inputs do we need for the strategic planning process? What do we do with those inputs? So that would be a couple-day session probably in the next 4 or 5 weeks. And what comes out of that session? And then once you have those outputs, how do you deploy it? How do you deploy it down into the departments and make sure that action occurs according to the way we decide as a group that we want action to occur? It's not real difficult to build the strategic plan. Most of you know what the issues are, and that's the second thing I want to do is get your input on those issues today. But the hard thing is executing it, making sure people know they're accountable for this or that in a timely fashion, whether it's a project or that needs to be executed in a timely fashion, or it's some measurement of performance that's not doing so well that we need to address. So again, 2 things today, mostly kind of context, so you understand the process, the inputs, the process of developing the strategy, and then executing it over a period of time, including I would suggest monthly reviews of performance to make sure that people are being held accountable for those things that we thought were important. And then the second thing is start the process of gaining inputs, and that's from you. And that's kind of what you see the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats on the wall for. And then tomorrow we're going to I'll be meeting with some of the, senior managers from the county and getting input from them. And so I'll show you all the different inputs that we get. And you can give me your suggestions or give me your questions. I'll try to keep it moving for you. So wanted to introduce you a bit to Active Strategy. It's a company that I created with a business partner of mine about 13 years ago, and we ran it kind of entrepreneurially for 13 years, and then we were just acquired about 9 months ago by the advisory board company, and I got this new thing I was telling Tom about called a boss. And times are different these days, but it was a good thing because they're a good, strong company. And you probably have never heard of them, but they are a company based out of Washington, D.C. I'll tell you a little bit about them. I wanted to show you how we could help how we have helped other organizations improve their results, their performance, kind of execute their strategy, if you will, and then go through the process of planning, deployment, execution. Any questions from you, concerns from you, suggestions, those kind of things that you think we should build into the process. We certainly want to hear that. Plus your input as to what you think the key issues are. That's the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So Active Strategy, as I mentioned, was co-founded in 2000 by a fellow by the name of Jeff Bunting and me. And Jeff was the propeller head. So he would be this technology guy here. And I was kind of the business consulting guy. So I was more the performance excellence practitioner. So a technology person and a strategy practitioner go together, and those two don't usually go together. But we created some software and that locked in some of the processes to do strategic planning, deployment, improvement, just to improve the performance of things that are the most important to you. And then, as I mentioned, we were acquired in late 2012 by the advisory board. And we generally did three different things, and that was, consulting, coaching, training. So that's where strategic planning would fall in that area. We would do implementation and support. That would be for the technology. And then we would help organizations with the improvement piece of it. Because that's what strategic plan, in my mind, that's what strategic planning is all about. From your viewpoint and from everybody's viewpoint, collectively, what do we think are the most important 3 to 5 things that we need to move ahead or get improved on? These are some of our clients. We are not all public sector, but we do have, you can see Miami-Dade, and that's the one where you had, I guess, heard about us, and that's the one that they put in the order that you've done. And I thought it was a great thing. The head of kind of the GK of Miami-Dade at the time was a fellow that was really trying to say, okay, if we're going to put this in place to develop and execute our strategy, and he goes away, which he has, how do we keep it alive? How do we make sure that the next people coming in will continue to run the county the way we think it should be run? His name was George Burgess, and he was really a good forward-thinking fella. And they had monthly, what he called strategy reviews, and so they had, at the time when I started working with them, they had 62 departments, 9 assistant county managers, and then George, and they're much smaller now. They've got like 25 departments because they've pushed a lot of them together, consolidated because of cost cutting in the state of Florida. But they still have those strategy reviews to make sure that the important things that need to be done are getting done in a timely fashion. So we've done work at the VA. We have a couple clerk of the courts that we've actually worked with, both in Florida, one Orlando and another one Pasco, which is on the west coast of Florida, just north of St. Petersburg. And then we have a lot of not-for-profits, hospitals, small companies like Coca-Cola, complex organizations like NATO. Be thankful you're not NATO.
What the heck did you do for NATO?
Well, NATO actually needed the most help. NATO has 28 nations now that go together and form what looks like an organization, but is not. And they have to have somebody from each of the 28 nations high enough like a 2-star or something like that, or an admiral, right, in charge of different things in NATO, whether they have the skills to do it or not. That's why they need it. They have a really dysfunctional, to me, a culture. And so trying to bring them together to execute a strategy for NATO is a challenge. So it's the same thing, though. What is your strategy? You know, what do you need to do to execute it properly and so forth? It's the same type of thing. It was difficult, though. So these are some of the things that we do and we'll hopefully be able to do with you, and that would be the planning. That's kind of the initial focus, so the inputs and then building the plan. And out of the plan come, you know, what are the most important measures that we want to track to show how we're performing, and what are the most important initiatives / projects that you have decided you want to work with, you're going to fund, and we need to make sure they move ahead. Could be process improvement because some of the departments, you know, need to be improved. I have no idea. Or it could be transportation. It could be facilities. Whatever it is, and we want to make sure that moves along in a timely fashion. So here's the performance measurement. We'll talk about that as we get together in a couple weeks to meet on what the plan is as we begin to exit those couple of days. Then the question comes up as to what are some of the things we want to measure that would tell us how we're doing. And what we would start with was if there's anything you measure now. And then, of course, we've worked with enough counties where we can actually suggest some things that others use. And then as we deploy it down into the organization, so this strategy gets deployed using a scorecard, if you've heard of those, you know, gets deployed down into the different departments, and those departments need to align upward to make sure they're working on the right things, and they also need to embody their daily measures to see if they're delivering what they need to deliver to the citizens in a timely fashion, in a quality fashion. Usually from one of these sessions comes way too many things we want to work on. More than our budget could handle and more than our people could handle, and still do the daily work. And so a big part of this is prioritization of, you know, so if we come out with, well, one I was working with in the state of Ohio, they came out with 34 improvement initiatives. And 34 is okay if you work on it over a long enough period of time. But so what we had to do is basically we defined the top 11 that we would start with, because that's what the organization could handle, both budget-wise and also people-wise. And so prioritization of initiatives is really important. It's not, can we work on all these? We can work on all these over time. It's a question of which ones are the most important to start with. So that's a big piece of the strategic planning. And then once you get it decided what the plan is, how's it going? Visibility down into the performance of the plan. Are the key metrics that are not performing well, are they being worked on? Are they being improved? Are the key initiatives, like those 11 that I just mentioned to you, are they moving along in a timely fashion? Because if you don't do those initiatives, nothing gets better. It just, unless you count on chance, it just won't improve. And so you have to do things to change either the way you do business, the roads you're building, the buildings you're building, whatever you're doing, whatever's important. So one of the things that I like to do, and we'll talk about this, I'll start talking about it probably tonight at dinner with GK, but I'd be interested to hear what you would say too. If I said to you, what are the top 3 measurements, like number of this, or percentage of that, or dollars of this, what are the top 3 measurements that are the most important measures that if you were going to put them on your website, and they were really performing well, let's say that, what would they be? So for example, for us, this one actually came from Clerk of the Court in the state of Florida, where they were cutting dramatically. Governor Scott was dramatically cutting back on budget. And so they needed to actually get more productive, or they would not be able to serve all the people they needed to serve. So all those cases you were talking about, for you, Tom, 60,000 or something like that, you said. So they still need to serve those 60,000 cases, and now they have to do it with 25% fewer people. And that's what they came up with. So one of their goals was to improve their productivity. So one of their top measures happened to be an internal measure for productivity. And you can see what they were able to do. And they did this by improving their business processes, combining some of the departments that looked like they had a lot of synergy to them and so forth. So one of the things, I'll give you a couple of another example. This happens to be a hospital. This is a hospital in Philadelphia, and when I asked the CEO there, he said, you know, as they move, MRSA, by the way, if you don't know what MRSA is, a nasty infection, Medicare is not funding MRSA that comes, particularly if it comes at the hospital, once somebody gets into the hospital. And so you can't have that if you're a CEO or a COO because you can't afford it. And so this was one of their top ones. This was another hospital. This one happens to be, I think most hospitals are not-for-profit, at least the ones I've worked with, but this one happened to be a for-profit hospital, and they were actually bleeding so badly they were in threat of going out of business. So one of theirs just happened to be profit. One of the counties that I worked with in the state of Florida that was not Miami-Dade County, which was Brevard County, which is where Cape Canaveral is, their top one was citizen satisfaction. So those are the kinds of things I would normally hear citizen satisfaction. I guess if I was in Tom's shoes, I'd hear citizen satisfaction, judicial satisfaction, attorney satisfaction maybe, but one way or another, there's some kind of customer satisfaction that you're trying to drive in the right direction. So, you know, that's a discussion, because I'd like to know, once we get the strategy deployed, where do we focus our improvement efforts on? And so you can give that one some thought, and if you have some thoughts, I'd be interested to hear. What would be the 1 to 3 top things? Think about it like a sports team, right? If I said to you, okay, Texas Rangers, 1 to 3 things, got your attention, I can see, 1 to 3 things that they need to do to improve, and make it a measure. Is it ERA? Is it ERA of the relief pitchers? Is it batting average? Is it home runs? Is it RBIs? What is it? What do they need help in?
More batters.
They need more hitters?
Yeah.
How do you come to that decision? Is it because the team batting average is lower than like the Oakland A's or some of the other competitors they have?
Well, they haven't been faring too well here lately.
They've been losing because they haven't been getting enough runs.
No hits.
Okay. So that's a data point, right? It says that apparently if I looked at the batting average maybe over the last couple of months of the Texas Rangers, it's down lower than it needs to be, and it's down lower than their competitors. And that's the same kind of thought process, I'd say, bring it to your situation. If you were being measured on something like productivity or citizen satisfaction or citizen satisfaction with the roadways, I mean, it can be more specific. Those kind of things, I'm anxious to hear what those are, because those are the things we want to target. So let's talk a little bit about the process. And please, if you have questions, I've seen this once before, or 10 times before, so if you have questions, jump up, back, any place. So with the strategic planning, the purpose is to define the direction that the organization wants to go in. So with that, you try to decide what do we want to work on for improvement and what may need to be improved, but we just don't have the bandwidth to work on it right now because it's not as important. Everything's important, but something is more important. And so that's what we're trying to do during those couple of days that we meet, decide, all right, what are the most important things to measure? What are the most important things to work on for improvement, whether it's capital projects or operational projects or whatever. And so that's what this comes into, making decisions on how to allocate capital and operational resources. So one of the first things we try to do is get inputs from all the right people or all the right constituents. Certainly one of them is the Commissioner's Court. That's why you're first. What are the things that you think are the most important issues that we need to consider? And so look at this kind of as a divergence, right? We're going to start to capture a lot of potential issues, some of which we'll be able to work on, some of which we won't yet because we just don't have the resources. But we want to hear first a divergence of what are all the things that we need to think about. At some point here in a couple weeks, we're going to have to say, let's now converge on the ones that we think need to be worked on first. And they may be obvious. I mean, these have to be top of mind to you, so it shouldn't be difficult for you to capture those. But that's one of the things I want to capture today. Tomorrow we'll capture it from staff, and I'll show you the different other ones in a minute that we'll capture from. And then determine the improvement opportunities to achieve the most optimal performance in pursuing that strategy, and that's the plan itself. So we will, coming out of the session when we get together, if you fast forward a little bit, I'll write up a plan so that it'll be stated what we decided. But the main couple things coming out of there will be kind of a scorecard. How are we going to track performance of the plan, key measurements, including those 3 to 5 that you come up with that are like the most important outcomes of Tarrant County. Plus, what are the most important initiatives? Again, we might come up with 34 like that organization did in Ohio, but what are the most important ones we want to start with? And then normally I was suggesting to GK monthly some kind of a review of performance. How are we doing on the measurements? Are the red ones, meaning the ones that are missing target, are they being worked on? Over time, are they turning to green? And are the initiatives that we thought were the most important progressing the way we thought they would? So the formula here is that if you have a county scorecard with the initiatives and you deploy it down to the departments and you hold people accountable for their piece of that strategy, plus making sure that their daily operations is running smoothly, then the initiatives, whether they're at the lower level or at the top level, will drive, hopefully, measures that are not performing, red measures, and turn them to green. And then your next question is, do I up the ante and increase the target? This year I maybe wanted to have 80% of the citizens happy with me. Next month or next year, do I want to have 90%? Or whatever you decide. So here's kind of what the roadmap looks like, and this is the context I was talking about. I always like to know, when we do this, how does it fit in the scheme of things? And by the way, how does this thing drive results? And so you all start with your mission and your requirements from legislature, those things that you are in place to do. And hopefully you have this vision that down here that at some point you'll be just a lot better than you are. And that takes into account what the kind of the weaknesses are now. Could be anything, could be transportation because you're growing so quickly. Could be facilities because you're growing so quickly. It could be services that you provide, health and human services. So whatever that is, those would have a target here of being much better measured by some standard. So how do you get there? So up here you do what we're starting here. We're saying, okay, based on this and where we want to be, what are the strengths, the internal strengths of the organization that we want to leverage and make sure they stay strong? So internal strengths. What are the internal weaknesses that the organization has? Could be doesn't have enough training. It could be there's a lot of turnover because of retirements. It could be technology, whatever it is. What are those weaknesses that need to be shored up? What are those opportunities that are out there outside of the organization that could be political, could be economical, that we could maybe leverage to get something done that we can't get done now, maybe to achieve some additional funding? Could be grants, could be toll booths, could be, whatever those opportunities are. And then what are the threats that we have? Could be the economy. It could be any of those other things I mentioned, political, economical, legal, and how would we mitigate those? And so you're looking at kind of, what are we good at internally, what are we weak at internally, and what's out there that either we could leverage, take advantage of to get better, or we have to watch out for and somehow mitigate it. Once we do that and we identify what are the top issues, we build a plan from that at this point, and then out of this strategic planning process comes 3 main things. So one is a strategy map. And I'll show you one of those in a minute because you probably haven't seen that. But a strategy map is just a picture of your key objectives over the next 3 to 5 years. So if you were to show this to the public, this is what we're about. This is what our focus is. And so that's this up here. And I'll show you one you can actually read in a minute. But the idea would be, these would be the things that we said, okay, This opportunity, just pick one, was so important that we decided we wanted to build an objective from it. So leverage this particular opportunity as maybe the objective, and that would be one of the boxes on this strategy map that we're going to focus on. The other thing that comes out of this are what are some of the outcomes, those three measures that I mentioned to you, like citizen satisfaction or productivity or budget compliance or whatever they might be. It could be law enforcement focused if that was a situation. Certainly in Miami-Dade it was. And then the other thing that comes out of it is a scorecard of metrics and initiatives that we want to track. So this is a bit of a communication for staff and for the public. This is the thing that we really care about the most important measurable outcomes. And this is going to be tracking those outcomes and building initiatives to achieve those improvement in those outcomes. And if you do that year after year, you hopefully are consistent with your mission, consistent with your charge from the legislature, and you'll achieve a much better performance. Now, along the way, a couple things have to happen, because if it stays at this level, meaning a top-level scorecard, and you don't translate it into audit terms, budget terms, and I know some of these don't report directly to you, but like law enforcement terms, clerk of the court terms, if you don't translate it into the drivers of it, then the people that work down in the organization don't really know very specifically how they can help achieve that strategy. And that's what this is all about. So again, at Miami-Dade, they had several outcomes that they were focusing around safety of the community, so law enforcement. Culture was another, but as measured by something. Parks and recreation was one of their focuses as measured by a couple of key things. And then they had one of these for the GK level for George Burgess, and then we deployed these kind of scorecards and translated the strategy down into the department levels. Again, 62 departments to start with. So now each of the departments knew exactly what their role was in achieving this. So, one of these initiatives which lived at the top probably was shared by 3 or 4 or 5 departments. They had to work collaboratively to make that occur, which is a difficult thing. It's easy if you have a functional silo and you say, I want you to work on this. But if you take 5 functional silos and say, I need you to work together on that, it makes it a little more difficult, but that's one of the challenges. We, as I mentioned to you, we had performance reviews of measures and initiatives every month. And then over time, they improved dramatically. So they actually, their productivity is much better these days. They recently embarked on Lean Six Sigma. Are you familiar with what that is? It's a process improvement way of things. They spent, I think, $120,000 for Lean Six Sigma training and coaching, and they've saved so far $2 million. I'm just getting started, but that's the idea, right? There's a return on investment for that they show the public. Now, along the way, besides saving $2 million, they've improved things in their public work department, in their transit department, and others. So, along with productivity improvement comes quality improvement. So they're doing some great things. But that's what the journey looks like. Over the next month, 2 months maybe, we'll get to here. We should have this pretty well finalized as we leave our process here in 4 or 5 weeks when we get together again. We should be zeroing in on what are the most important measures that, 2 or 3 measures that we want to work on. And we'll have a scorecard. We might have to prioritize initiatives because we have too many. Again, initiatives are just projects, things that, have timelines on them, like building a building or building a road or anything that has a timeline to it. And the measures are kind of the last to occur. You want to make sure that you have measures that that are really meaningful to track, and that are ones that you don't mind sharing with anyone, right? Any questions on kind of the journey we're going through and where we are right now? No? So let's break it down into a little more detail. This is where the inputs are coming from for this organizational piece right here. Now, this is what occurs when we get back together after we have all the inputs and say, how do we take all these inputs? Remember, we diverged. This is serious divergence. You have a lot of inputs to look at. Now, how do we converge them into the most important ones that would result? Now, this is a strategy map with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 key objectives on it. So of the potentially, tens of initiatives or even hundreds of initiatives, this group has decided they were going to focus on 10 different things over the next 3 years. So let's take a look at these. This is where we are today. I'd like your honest input in the area of internal strengths, internal weaknesses, if you're aware. More importantly, I guess you could probably help tremendously in external opportunities and threats that we might have to either leverage or deal with as we build our strategic plan. Tomorrow, senior team, I don't know if, I guess we'll get most of the ones that we want to talk to. Tonight I'm going to try to pull a bunch of stuff out of GK's head to see what his issues are. Select departmental SWATs would be tomorrow. And then inputs from as many, I think, of the 68 elected officials as we can get. And GK, I didn't know if you wanted to talk about how we're going to do that a little bit.
Some of the things that we have kicked around, and I believe Commissioner Fickus, you were the one who was emphasized that we needed to, you really wanted to see all 68 of our elected officials involved. And I know that the judge has utilized a breakfast type environment, I think, on the United Way process, that we might want to consider having a breakfast type first meeting with our elected officials so that we could explain what we're trying to accomplish and how we're trying to accomplish that. However, putting 68 different individuals in one room and who don't have the same responsibilities, making those all 68 elected officials, we thought it would be overly complex and not productive to do it all in one group, but rather to break that down into some type of subject group, courts, constables. Obviously, we'll have to use some elected officials in all of those, the various courts, what their needs might be, and just treat them as focus groups. And, of course, invite the court members to participate in that type of a meeting so that we could draw their input out, begin to then move that into more of the organizational SWAT and go that way. I really think that we would be more successful if we broke them down into subject matters rather than bringing all 68 together for several days worth of talking to them. So that's how we thought that we would at least recommend to you all. I do think, though, that a breakfast or some type of gathering could at least, I think it's important that you all as a group explain what we're trying to do and how we're going to go about trying to accomplish it.
So a couple things. This is, two brains are not nearly as good as a whole bunch of different brains thinking about this. We would need to give them some context as to what we're doing, and certainly if you could help with that, that would be great. But what thoughts do you have? 68, not that we'd get all 68, but whatever comes, we want to make sure we engineer it in a way that they feel that we're really listening to them. And so GK came up with a piece of maybe we should segment them into groups where they have some kind of common themes and thoughts will come out of it. But any thoughts from anybody here as to how we could do that best?
He's talking about doing it in, like, for example, within the judiciary, there might be the criminal, there might be the civil, there might be either the civil and family or family and probate or whatever, and then with those you would have the clerks that work with those particular areas of
something like that.
It may be both of them at that time, or it may also be the DA's office.
Just trying to find some, yes, sir, some that have a commonality such that when one of them speaks up, the other one isn't like checking out, right? Yes, sir.
How many total of those meetings do you want to have? And then I think that's how you figure out how you're gonna divide it up. I mean, if you wanna have 3 meetings.
Something like that.
Get everybody,
That's a good order of magnitude, I
And,
think, if we could do that.
or 2 or 4, or, you know,
Well, I think your JPs and your constables may be one group
yeah.
that would be at the same time.
We thought about 4 or 5 different groups.
Okay.
That seems more doable than 2 or 3.
So 4 to 5, and what would they be? JPs and constables, you said. What would some of the other ones be?
Criminal district courts, county criminal courts, those could maybe be joined. We could,
They
yes.
could be joined.
Civil courts. But I think when you look
For
at
the district and county.
probate, you probably have to treat somewhat differently, but you'd also have to treat family court just a little bit differently also. And there are support elements that attach to each of those courts besides the clerks and the DA. And like juvenile, for the juvenile court, but you also have juvenile probation, things like that.
We got chairs in here, you don't have to sit out there in the middle of the hall. I think, like, for example, we've also got what I call the big 5 departments, which are your tax assessor, district and county clerk, sheriff, and DA. Whether or not they come together as one group to have discussions, I'm not sure.
We would probably treat them individually.
That's a good idea.
They would fall with
Select departmental SWATs. So did you say, Judge Whitley, tax assessor, district and county clerk, sheriff and DA? Would you say? Yeah, so we could do those separately under the.
But at the same time, I would have the DA and I'd have the sheriff's department in with the criminal judges.
Okay.
And the district and county clerks too, because of the fact that so much of that work is done together.
Okay.
And I'm also not altogether uncertain that you shouldn't have the department heads, at least HR, and some of them in that same room, because I think a lot of their work, in fact, probably your department heads, at least HR and facilities, need to be in the room just to hear what's all saying. So we're sitting here saying we don't need to have a one with everybody in it. I agree with that, but there are going to be several of those breakouts where you're going to still have everybody, all the department heads and everyone else in there just to kind of interact.
And the senior team SWAT, that would not only include our department heads, but it would include county auditor, purchasing departments, any of those that are appointed, because they are really part of our senior management team.
IT.
When we talk about, I think what we've scheduled for tomorrow is facilities, HR, budget, IT, public health. I think we had 7 or 8. I think in audits and purchasing.
Have you delivered to us the schedule of who all you're meeting with and when?
No, in fact, we were developing that this morning.
So that's.
What was you talking about, you're meeting with them tomorrow? I mean, we need to hear that as rapidly as possible if we'd like to. I mean, I think some of us might like to attend those.
So you said.
Oh, wait a minute. I mean, are you meeting with some in the morning?
We're going to, initially, we were going to meet with those department heads that report to me. We were going to meet at 9 o'clock in the morning, then for about an hour. Then we're going to do a breakout of individual, so that we could get their input, just like we're seeking your input here on the SWAT.
Well, and the one thing I would just say is on all of those meetings, we need to get that list out to all of us.
Okay.
And determine who is planning on being at those meetings, and if we got 3, you got a posting problem. And so I mean, I don't know about the other 4, but I'd like to at least know when some of those meetings are occurring with enough lead time that if 3 of us decide we want to be there, that we don't, one of us have to get told we can't.
So, Judge, the way we were thinking about it, I think, was the first hour, hour and a half would be kind of what we're doing now. Given, so that would be duplication for you. It'd be, what's this all about? What's the process all about? Getting people level set for where we're headed. But then we would break out, and this is to your point, we would break out into facilities, HR, budget, IT, public health, audits, and purchasing, if those are the ones individually going through the day, half hour, 45 minutes each. That's what we need to get to you, so you know when they are. And in case you have, like, boy, I really want to be there for whatever, I don't know, whichever one appeals to you.
I kind of like the idea that you threw out earlier about having a universal meeting where you go through all of this this background stuff
Right.
and environmental stuff
Right.
one time,
Yeah.
and that will save time in the individual
And that,
meeting.
Commissioner Brooks, that's what we plan to do first, like from 9 to maybe 10 or 10:30. Just what you said, universal meeting, one time. So anybody that's coming to those other meetings can be there to hear what are we going to meet about later today.
Is that for the 68 elected officials?
No, these are tomorrow, this is just departments. So we've kind of segued from, we started by asking you, how should we do the 68? And we've segued into internal ones. So
Why not have just one big meeting where everybody's coming together the first time to hear this, as opposed to having, because I hear you saying now, well, you're going to have just your department, and then you're going to have just the department heads, and then when are we going to have the 68 electeds, and why not do all of that as an initial kickoff?
Our reasoning on that was because Jack was going to be here for 2 days, and we were going to have the court at this meeting today, and then in the morning, we were just going to have our individual staffs talk about it. And then after that, we were going to have the larger meeting.
Well, that's fine. But I still think when he comes back, wouldn't it make sense to go ahead and do
one big
give
meeting.
everybody, plenty of notice that we're going to have a meeting, figure out where you're going to have it.
Absolutely, that's
Do the public notice so we can have more than three. We can have 3 commissioners or more there.
that's
That's putting the horse after the cart. You need a kickoff meeting, in my opinion, that can be sponsored by this court and get all of the electeds, all of the department heads and senior folk that are going to have to participate in this process, and let us emphasize that this is the direction that the court is going, and if y'all don't participate, there will be consequences. And yeah, there will be consequences because we're going to measure their participation, and there will be consequences. And then go into your individual team meetings. Let's have a rah-rah session first.
And there's no problem with that, by the way. We just need to figure out something productive for tomorrow. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Well, I
But I
think,
thought that's what I suggested.
Yeah, you did.
but tomorrow, you're only talking with department head, or only with the people out of his department.
We can do whatever would be
What have you
productive.
got planned right now?
That's what we have.
Who are you going to meet with tomorrow?
Well, actually, it's some outside, too, because it's
Well,
purchasing.
Some of our other department heads, but like internally, we were going to meet with economic development. Okay, that's one. We're going to do some criminal justice piece with not the sheriff's department or anything like that, but our internal criminal justice people, and probably some grants people. A lot of it is going to be internal to our department. But at the same time, when Jack was here, we were going to take advantage of the other department heads, so we could work some of those in and pick up some of that data.
When are you going to be back for your next meeting?
Well, I was kind of hoping I would find that out this afternoon, because we needed to make sure it was okay with you. What we didn't, I have other times open next week, week after that. It's just a matter of when we think is best and what we think is best. But what I'm hearing now is whenever we can pull a rah-rah meeting together for the group and then break out into subgroups accordingly, right?
You got to create some buy-in.
Sure.
And for all of these electeds and department heads to see that this is important to the court,
You bet.
and this is the way things will be done in the future, I think it's important.
I do too.
And we don't want to forget the medical examiner's office. That's a large operation of our county, juvenile. A lot of people I haven't heard mentioned yet.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think might reinforce that is, and we have our leader, the judge, but I think it would help if there was a part could be played by all four commissioners and the judge. And not to take anything away from the judge, because he will be leading the meeting, but let all four commissioners maybe have something, have an agenda, have something that we would say to reinforce that this is the right process that we're looking forward to going through and how important it is. And to let those out there, our peers who are elected also, know that we're engaged in this also. It's not just the judge, or it's not, the whole court is engaged.
And I also think that, I mean, I know you're going to talk about each one of these with each one of those individual groups, but I think it's important for them to really understand how much, is just as the commissioner just said, how much we want them engaged and how interested we are in what they perceive to be the main goals. I mean, if we sit here and try to define the priorities and then give them those priorities, they're not going to be near as involved as they're going to be if
You're right.
we all sit around a table and help set priorities, and then we at least have a chance to go back from there.
I liken it to how we rolled out the SAP program. It required substantial buy-in from every corner of county government, and we brought them all together and explained it.
So when we have that kickoff, do you, back to Commissioner Fickus, your point, would each of you kind of explain a piece of this process, or would you just kind of endorse it individually in some way, in your own words, right? Either way, by the way, I'm fine, because without this buy-in, people are not going to think it's important, and you're wasting your time. So I'm with you on this. I was just asking, is this, so I guess we need to decide, when we have that kickoff, and you're all involved, it could be just that you have a few words to say why this is important to you and endorse it. Yeah. Same with Commissioner Wynn. Okay, and then the process piece, I guess I could go through just like I'm going through now.
But I think if, to the extent that each one of us individually want, I think it is important that if each one could explain a different area or something that they may want, it may be that as we move down the line, if we have a segment that's on law enforcement, Commissioner Johnson may decide, okay, he's going to be working primarily with the DA's office or with the Sheriff's Department. He may want to kind of head up that, and we may end up asking from each one of those groups, whether it be the criminal judges or whether it be some of those other things, to appoint someone to be kind of responsible for being a part of that strategic plan. It may be and so we may end up creating somewhat of an executive group that says, in addition to the five of us, there may be someone from the Sheriff's Department or someone from the DA's department or someone from the criminal judges or the JPs or the constables that will participate in some of those meetings where we're really trying to focus and narrow down some of those decisions.
So not just this group and GK's direct reports, but those like in Tom's area or other areas that would also be kind of on that executive group, which would now be somewhat expanded, largely to get their thoughts, but also their buy-in, right?
Yes, because as they'll remind us on a regular basis, they're elected too. Mm-hmm. And for us to set a quota and just give it to them and say, here, this is what is expected of you without them feeling participatory in that process, I think they're going to say, we don't need this.
Okay.
For what it's worth, we never went to that. We've always thought that, we've always believed that it had to be fully participatory by the people that are working in the field.
This is good stuff. Yes, sir, Tom.
Your
apparently going to start tomorrow. What is the end date that the product is supposed to be delivered? In other words, you'd be going through all of this hierarchy up here, including elected officials. When would you, what is your end date? What is the compression of time here that we need to deal with?
Yeah, I think I'll let GK talk about this, but my feeling is the actual number of hours to get the input and to do it is not as difficult to deal with as the schedules that you have to get for people, right? So it's probably, because of that, Tom, maybe 2 months. I mean, if we had to do it, and maybe it could be long, maybe it has to be longer. If we had to get it in and do it all this month, we could, except we couldn't get all the schedules synced, right? That's the problem. That's why today is later than we wanted it to be, was to try to sync it with everybody's schedule that's in the room. So I don't know if that answers your question. No, I think your target was about the end of October, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The end of October, first part of November.
So it's not really open-ended.
Like Jack was saying, you know, a good example is, what's the best time to get the criminal judges together? That's going to be difficult. You know, maybe we need to look at something like a non-jury week, where that they'll be able to give us a couple of 3 or 4 hours. Those type of things. That's the type of scheduling we have to do. There's a lot of the elected officials that, like the clerks and the sheriff and the tax assessor, and that we have fairly quick access to, but the judges, they have their own schedules. And so it's that scheduling process that takes the time. Just a good example is this meeting here. We try for almost 2.5 weeks to be able to find a time when the court could actually come to meet. So that's going to be the biggest challenge. I don't believe, like Tom said, I don't believe it's going to be the actual hours spent. It's getting everybody in the right people in the room together.
But our goal is the end of October, right? To come away with this and a preliminary of this to start to think about deployment, right? But to do that, I mean, Tom, the one that eats up the time is getting all these inputs. And it's more than getting the inputs. It's, as you pointed out, getting the buy-in. So I like what I heard. I mean, I've worked with organizations that don't have executive buy-in, and it's just a waste of time. Your SAP system wouldn't have worked if you didn't support it. It's like, it's new, it's a pain in the butt, I already have enough to do, leave me alone. That you could say that about anything. And so I'm buying what you're saying. I think if we can come across in unity, this is great.
That was at least a 2-year process.
Yeah. Well, this one, just to get a strategic plan isn't that. But to get it executed, it's going to take a while.
I think it's important for us to get the buy-in of the big departments, the sheriff departments, for example, because his budget is a big portion of our total budget. If we don't get the buy-in of the sheriff, I think we may or will experience a third of failure. So it's very important that we get the buy-in of the elected officials, especially those who lead the large departments. We don't want this process to drag on forever, but if we do this time, if we do it right, then the next strategic planning session can be built upon this one.
Absolutely.
And it will be less time consuming.
That's right.
So I think we want to get it right. The objective is to get it right. So, and the key factor in getting it right is for this strategic planning process and the ultimate product that comes from it become a product of everybody, of the county. It should be our strategy. It shouldn't be the commissioner's court strategy.
Right.
And I think that's very important.
Good points. Okay. So I guess what we need to do, GK, is decide what can we work on tomorrow just to be productive, but plan for this kickoff. And for the off-site session, or for the session where we do the planning, how do we include the big departments, or making sure that everybody is there that needs to be there. A couple of good points, okay. So at that off-site session, we should have the inputs of you, of the as many of the elected officials as we can, of the whatever departments we, the big departments or whatever ones we decide to include, of the select departments that you involve. And so now we've got this bunch of information, and this here then is how do we take it and focus it to come up with whatever it is that's focused. In this case, this shows like 8 objectives. So the definition of an objective is a verb noun, something that will last a couple of years. So improve citizen satisfaction, improve productivity of the workforce. Things like that are objectives. And they're fairly broad, but then you would narrow them by saying, how are we going to measure those? Because that's what defines an objective. And what are we going to do about them? Those are the initiatives. And so the idea, right, is if you do the right initiatives, start to finish, you should improve a measure which will then help you achieve your objective over time. It's kind of a cause and effect type thing. So let's talk a little bit about a strategy map. And I don't know, have anybody in the room ever heard of that strategy map? A couple. Okay, good. So a strategy map is really, to me, it's a communication tool. So it's this one down here for staff, for citizens, for anybody that could be the press. This is what we're going to focus on over the next few years. And this one here happens to be, I don't even know if you can read it, but it happens to be a Watershed Conservancy district that covers about 25% of the state of Ohio. But any entity that is doing a strategic plan should have kind of a high-level executive graphical view of what it's all about, and that's what this is. So the way this works, I'll show you some examples. It's got objectives on it. There are no measures on a strategy map. It's just about key issues that we're going to focus on. So I don't know if you can see these, but I'll read them to you. So this is a Watershed Conservancy district, and their highest level outcomes, remember the ones I talked to you about where you want to measure that's really important, that you want to focus on? They're talking about benchmarking and branding and improving partnerships. So if you saw the measures for that, you'd know that their biggest problem is image. They have charged fees of people that have lots in their watershed district, and the people are very unhappy with them and feel like they're squandering the money. And so they have an issue where they couldn't get anything done if they wanted to because they have such a terrible image from the people that live in that watershed district. Interestingly enough, within the past few years, here's one down here, natural resource stewardship, they actually found gas and oil in the shale on their land, and now they have some kind of a windfall of probably over $1 billion rolling their way. And this is an organization that had a $20 million budget, small organization. So now they actually don't have to charge those fees that are making the people upset with them. But the question is, what do they do with those funds before the state swoops in and says, we'll take them, which of course they will, right? So this is a little different situation. What they've decided, though, is they want to effectively manage their operations, and to do that, they're going to have to make some capital investment because they had some aging. This is an organization that manages lakes, parks, and things like that, and everything they had was aging. And so you look at this, and if you look at the strategy map, and I read it bottom to top for you, you would get a feel for what their focus is, kind of the ones I just said to you. And that's what we could build here for, this is what our focus is. Yes, sir?
So to the extent that, we're kind of looking at this, from that perspective, you've got current services that we're providing and how well are we doing with that? And then secondly, on to the future, what should we be looking to do in the future to maintain the quality that our citizens currently have?
Right.
So
they have a couple things going for them to try to answer that. They have a bunch of existing services that they just have to improve because they've deteriorated so much, because they were working off a lack of budget for the longest time. So part of it is to improve, like they have a master park plan that's part of this capital investment, which will upgrade and help provide those services. because they had a windfall, they now have new services that they'll provide as well. Yes, sir.
I think like that district that you're highlighting there, we've got a branding problem here in Tarrant County. If you ask citizens about the things that county government does, they'll say, oh, those things are working well. But they don't know that it's county government that provides those services. So we've got a tremendous branding problem. People don't know what we do.
Yeah, that
But
was
if you ask
part of it
them
here.
about specific things, they say, oh, yeah, that's going well.
It's
that's
going well, but
well,
they don't
that's
know
going
Tarrant County government does it.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And that's part of the issue here. They had,
County government, period.
yeah. Pardon me?
They don't know county government, period.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any difference whether it's Tarrant or Orange or Broward or, yeah.
Yep. So here's another example of a strategy map to just get you a feel for it. This happens to be the Miami-Dade County Library System. So, if you're familiar with library systems, you know what they do, but the idea here would be, if you look through this a little bit, again, these are called perspectives. All this does is divide the objectives into different areas. So, fiscal areas, employee areas, efficient operations, and then customer or citizen. And so this one says that if we can ensure stakeholder support and execute the budget to maximize the strategy, then we can deploy our annual staffing plan and improve our training, which will help us get a better IT infrastructure, deploy our balanced scorecard and metrics, and improve our method for collecting customer feedback. And then with that, we'll be able to improve safety, the presence, and the appearance of the libraries, which will eventually drive us to delivering 5-star customer experience. So you don't live in Miami-Dade County. You can imagine what it's like living in Miami-Dade County. Some areas of it, they have problems. Libraries have problems with safety and appearance there. They're not going to be rated as 5-star if I don't feel comfortable going to the library after 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And so this is one of those ones where you look at it and you say, well, maybe they're not executing the budget strategically. Maybe they're not collecting customer feedback. And maybe they're not as safe and nice looking as they need to be. And that's what's causing them to get a bad rap. Again, this is a library. This isn't Tarrant County, but this came out of their strategic planning session. Here's that one we just looked at. It's a little bit bigger and easier to read. So this is the strategy map. So the strategy map is really something you can use to communicate to whoever needs to be communicated to as to this is what we're going to focus on over the next few years. We're going to measure performance in each of these areas, and we're going to, as much as we can, do things to improve each of these areas, whichever way we decide are the most important. Maybe we can't do something in each area right now, but we're going to work on in these areas over the next few years. So this group, their biggest dollar was right here, and it was to help manage the operations and improve not only their branding but their reputation. And that was the Watershed Conservancy. So if you take this and move it to a scorecard, this has in it the areas that we want to focus on, meaning in this case it was financial, customer, operations, and stakeholders. And so now turning this into a scorecard, you add measures, you add targets for those measures, and you add initiatives that you're going to work on, and now you have a scorecard. So the relationship between the strategy map, which is a high-level communication device, and the scorecard is just, now the scorecard takes this and measures it and says, what are you going to do about it? Whoops. So here's a little discussion on the scorecard, and then I'll show you one. So the scorecard is designed to give you a comprehensive view of the organization. When we did the first scorecard in Miami-Dade, it had 7 external areas to it at the GK or at the Commissioner's Court level. And those external areas were all citizen-focused. They were like safety, cleanliness-focused, culture-focused, all issues, economic development-focused, all issues that you would think of as external-facing. And so that was what was on the top scorecard. But as soon as you move down to the department, then we started to include things like employee measures, operational measures, fiscal measures, right? And so that's one way to do it. It's up. We can decide that as a group, whether at the top we want what's called a balanced scorecard. So a balanced scorecard said I have several things where I'm balancing different stakeholders, fiscal, employee, operations, and external. Or your top scorecard can be, what are my key issues that are facing the community? Those would be on the top scorecard. Those would be measurable. Then as soon as I deploy them, I need to make sure that I include the people that get the work done, right? The employees or the process or the other ones. So I don't know if you had heard the term balanced scorecard, but balanced scorecard's been around since about 1992. And it's the idea there is to make sure that you have objectives in the different areas that you need to address to be a successful organization. Not just the external citizen, but also the employees and also the fiscal side of it. So my thought would be that certainly you want balanced scorecards at least at the department level, maybe at the top as well. Just know that the Miami-Dade model was all, at the top was just external. Again, economic development, cultural, and so forth. So here's how a scorecard, well, let me show you what one looks like, first of all. So a scorecard has those same perspectives in it. This happens to be a secondary school scorecard. So the perspectives are student achievement, workforce development, and other ones that make it balanced in nature. And then the things that came out of the strategic planning session would be the things like 1.1, prepare all students for future success, 1.2, improve the health of the students, and so forth. So those are the objectives. They all have measures to them. So under prepare all students for future success, the measure here would be what are the state achievement scores? So what's our target and how are we doing? And by the way, based on our target, I don't know what the actual is. It's under that word, but we're not doing so well. So that's one you would think you might want to have an initiative on, and that's what this one is right here. So this initiative is to try to drive the achievement scores up. So that's the definition of a scorecard. And on the scorecard, here's kind of how it works. If we do the right initiatives and we don't do too many of them, these are the projects, improvement projects, then we should help drive our measures to meet their targets, which will help us achieve our objectives, which are the blocks on the strategy map across all the different objectives, or across all the different perspectives. So coming out of the strategic planning session, we'd like to know what are these, and what are these. And we'd like to make sure that if we work on the right ones of these, we indeed believe it will drive these, the most important ones, to meet our objectives. So one of the reasons I want to know, what do we think, we don't have to do it today, but what do we think are important measurable outcomes for Tarrant County? And it could be what you stated, and that is some measure where the citizenry actually knows what we do. They think the services we provide are good, and they, in fact, know that we do it. Because right now it sounds like they think the services are fine, but they don't even think about who provides it. And so maybe there's a survey, a top-of-mind survey to do that. The question would be then, shouldn't we be picking initiatives that would make that happen? So if we thought one of the key measures was we'd like to measure now and see that, by golly, you're right, maybe I'll make this up, 10% of the citizenry even knows the type of service we provide. And in 2 years, 70% of the citizenry knows the type of service we provide, and they're happy with them. And if that's the measure, then we better pick some initiatives to get us from here to there. And they could be PR initiatives or, I don't know, whatever. So let me take you back to this one. Any questions on any piece of this journey before I start to ask you about some of your inputs for the process we're going to do?
How do you make sure that you get honest participation from your audience? You get the exact and accurate inputs and so forth. How do you planning to do that?
You know, generally that's not a problem, I think, because we get it from so many different directions, right? So you can kind of check and balance it, right? I mean, I doubt I'm going to get, from this group, I'm going to get what's in your mind. You're going to give me what's honest and in your mind, I would think. Whether you do it in front of here or off to the side, you say, I didn't want to say this in front of, you know, however you get it, however you provide it, usually I will get it from senior executives. If I do get, that's a great question, because if I do get some input from a lower level person and I only hear it and it seems isolated. For example, we were doing an assessment of one of the departments at Eli Lilly, the big pharmaceutical company, and he would hear some things that seemed isolated. We didn't hear them over and over again. And so we felt the need to go back and check those because everybody else was saying this, and then there was this voice in the wilderness over here. So I think what I'm looking for, Commissioner Wynn, would be hearing it from enough people to know that it must be an issue, right? And if I hear it in an isolated fashion, I got to go check it out.
Is part of the equation, I mean, we're talking about meeting with us and other elected officials and department heads. Is part of the equation involve our customer?
It should. It should. And, you know, I don't think I'd asked you this, but if we have had some customer surveys that told us how they felt about certain things, I don't know if you've done that or not.
We have not.
That would be terrific. Or maybe we need to design something where you have focus groups of customers, because usually it does.
I think an example of what he's talking about may be we get a lot of feedback from customers, if you will, constituents,
Right.
on departments closing too early. Tax office, for example, there's anywhere from 5 to 10 people a day out at our tax office that comes up right at 5 o'clock or a little bit afterward. Our credit union that we allow in our buildings, we've got an arrangement with them, they have late hours, and they have a lot of business because of that. But because we don't do this, we have to turn a lot of people back, and they're not real happy customers. Same thing with JPs. A lot of the things that come up with JPs, those offices are closed, if they're even there that day. When people are needing services from them. The sheriff's office, I think I saw a sheriff's representative here. A lot of people looking for accident reports and what have you after hours because they have to work during the day and they have to wait until the next day, as far as I know right now. But those kind of things,
Yes.
you want to weigh what the customers, our constituents, want. They would like to have more optional services than what we provide. That's in my 27 years experience.
You know, and along that same type of line, I think different areas of the county operate differently because, you know, you have continuously said your folks are looking for more after hours. We actually did after hours at our when I was commissioner. We did actually after hours there, and we'd get one, and we did it for like a year. And we'd get maybe 1 or 2 customers that would come in, very, very little return on that, and so.
But were all of your constituents aware of the fact that they could come in after hours? And my guess.
Well, we said after hours. I mean, we sent out a bunch of notices. We advertised it in the paper. We, you know, we put big signs up.
Well, I guess it's just difference in
and I think
precinct
that's
3
right.
and precinct 4, but that's the way. That's what I've experienced.
And I think it is different. I think that there is a different. Well, we got 1.8 million people, and they're all a little different. And I think the different cities or the different areas react differently in those kinds of things.
So a systematic way to do this would be to say if you had surveys of the different areas of town and see if that actually shows up, that you're closing too early. But a kind of an ad hoc way to do it, and I think it works, is you have indeed heard that. You've heard feedback from customers that we're closing too early. And what I've just surmised from hearing it is not all departments. Some departments, right, are going to be that way. So this is an issue that if we said, boy, this is going to get in the way of our, suppose the customer now knows that we do provide these services, our branding, but they're not happy because we're not open long enough for certain areas. That's an initiative we'd want to think about. Yes, sir.
Well, either we're closing too early or they're getting there too late. Now, which is it? Okay?
That's right. That's exactly
You know,
what it is.
But why are they getting there too late?
So we raise it, let's say we stay open 30 minutes longer, and after a year, you still got people that we're either closing too early or they're getting there too late at 5:30 versus 5.
Right, but if they have a good reason, let's say they get out of work at 5:30, right? Then the only way they can get there earlier maybe there is no way for them to get there earlier.
Well, I think there's an expectation of government as to when their business hours are. Most people recognize that government offices are not open at 7 o'clock at night or 6 in the morning or 7 in the morning. They typically run 8 to 5, okay? And that's the typical business day in the business world in Texas. Now, maybe it's different in Florida, New York, California, but I'm just saying there's an expectation, and I think it's our job to meet that expectation. I know we had some offices that were closing at 4:30. We may still have offices that close at 4:30. That creates a problem if they don't open till 9. You know, we had a passport office that opened late, and I talked to the head of that division, and he changed. But there's some expectation when we as servants to the public should be there.
So I like what I hear. There's a balance here. What you're saying is if we weren't meeting that expectation, like not opening till 9, we need to think about that because that flies in the face of the expectation. Maybe in some cases they stay open until 5. We just need to leave it at 5. But I guess the key would be this is a piece of feedback that says before we do anything with that, we'd need to research it and just see. Like, for example, how many people are coming in later? Is it a small number? And is it a good reason? Is it a reason to keep it open late? I mean, today is not the day to make that decision, but did you have something?
Well, just to piggyback on what my boss, Commissioner Johnson, was saying, when we moved into the new building,
Yes.
we got an automated lock. Sounds just like a death row cell. And the minute that clicks and 7 people are standing outside, I'm sorry. Whereas prior to that, I had the customer service option. I could go in and talk to one of the tax clerks, oh, I haven't cashed out yet, and we could show some initiative and some customer service. That's been taken away from us entirely. With that, what Commissioner Johnson is saying is accurate.
Okay.
We turn away a great number of people just because of those automated locks.
But maybe the priority that we're looking at here, this is a specific, but it is what kind of customer satisfaction are we getting right now for the services that we're currently offering?
And what are the issues?
And what causes those, if it's down, what causes it to be down? If it's up, what causes it to be up? So one segment is, how are we doing it, what we're doing right now? And then another segment that I think all of our departments should be looking at is, what services or what things do we feel like in the future that we're going to need to be doing in order to continue to serve our clients, which are the citizens our clients can be a lot of different things. For the most part, it may be citizens, but it's also the attorneys for some of them. For HR, it's all of the internal departments. It's serving the folks doing what we're doing right now, and then trying to identify those things that we're going to need to do in the future that are going to maintain the quality of life, the good feeling that we have about living in Tarrant County.
So the first one was understand what the customer perception is of how we're doing right now?
Well, I think it's understanding, customer satisfaction of what we're doing right now.
Okay.
But understand that you have to define our customers too. It could be an individual citizen, it could be a city, could be an attorney, could be an office.
Each department, it may be a different thing.
Right.
It could
And I
be,
think that's why we say, we define it as customers. HR, it's everybody internal. The sheriff, it may be the folks that he's keeping in his jail. And, you may think, well, who cares? But we do care. We do care.
So you're absolutely right. We'd have to
community
segment.
partners we do business with as well.
Pardon me?
The nonprofit organizations.
So we'd have to define the different segments,
The different customers.
different customer segments, and maybe define which ones are the most important ones to us. That's where we'd start. And you'd have to determine, and usually the way you do something like this is you start with focus groups to find out what is important, and then you do a survey to find out how do you think we're doing on these. So a two-part, right? Focus, what should we be doing? Second, how are we doing? And then the second one you said, Judge, was understand what
we try to identify what we're going to need to be doing in the future.
Right.
And so each one of these groups that we're talking about meeting with will need to scrutinize, one, who are our customers and what are we doing for them right now? And then two, where do we plan to be in 5 or 10 or 15 years? What do we think now that we may be doing that we're not doing now, or what are we doing now that we may not be doing then?
So we may not have a systematic way to do that yet. It sounds like coming out of this might be an objective called improved customer satisfaction. And an initiative might be, we've got to find a systematic way to segment our customers and ask them these questions, right?
5 to 10 years ago, we weren't collecting taxes online. We are now.
Right.
What are we going to be doing?
That's this one.
5 years and 10 years down the line.
Yeah, and the customer may not know the answer to this one, right? Because they don't necessarily know what they don't know. What they do know is, of the stuff you give me, I'm happy about this and I'm not happy about that. They do know that.
I don't think the second one I don't think the customer enters into the evaluation of the second one.
I agree. But
on
they
the
do
first
here.
one, They do on that.
Right. And so my point would be, maybe coming out of this planning session, we'll say, we don't have any surveys. We haven't had any focus groups. That sounds like a couple of initiatives we need to get started on so we can get the answer to this in a systematic way. Now, it's great that we all have, as commissioners, we all have experiences. We've heard this or we've heard that. But I think what we'd want to know is, across the board, what are the most important things, right? And you have to get that from a bigger group of customers. So the reason I'm putting these down is these are good things, and I could see an objective coming out of this around improve current and future satisfaction, stakeholder satisfaction. And there'll be some initiatives that would talk about, focus groups to identify what the issues are, surveys to determine how we're doing, and then some way to figure out where are we going with this. And that would be consistent with, if this truly is an issue and we hear it over and over and over again, then that would be one of the things we'd have to address.
And when you talk about the strengths to all of this are the employees that we have in the county. And so that speaks to, I think, training, or it speaks to the great employees that we have and how they look at the way they do their job every day.
Because they can make the customer happy if they're put in the right kind of system. Absolutely.
They're the only ones that make
right. But again, there are certain things that senior management can control, like the hours or like the offerings, like providing something online that the employee can't necessarily do. Now, once you provide it, the employees, they kick butt. They do it well. So we're kind of working our way through the SWOT with examples. Talk to me about other things that you've seen out there. This is an internal strength. We have great employees. This is kind of an internal weakness if indeed we are closing too early to keep And we'd have to decide somewhere along the line, is it enough customers that are unhappy? This is an opportunity we have to go out to our customers and find out some things. And then there's probably some threats we need to worry about as well. So you've provided some examples for yourselves, but let me hear you kind of, what other things do we need to think about that are issues or strengths for the county as we start to...
I think financially we're pretty strong, internal strength. That's an internal strength.
That's a great one, by the way.
I think a potential weakness is the, maybe the seniority, and it's seniority of our staff, or the closeness to retirement of the
Gotcha.
manager.
Yeah.
Are you talking about Commissioner Johnson?
No, he's not.
Hell, we'll
If
carry
he is,
him
I'm going to take it personal.
We'll carry him out of here, I can tell you that.
We were talking about the DA's office, Marvin Collins and Group.
So do you have a thing like some of the states have where the people that are going to retire get on this 5-year drop list? No. So do you even know when people are going to retire? That's the scary thing. So do you have succession plans? You do.
We do in some areas.
So that was a possible initiative where you would build succession plans in the areas that you don't have them.
Succession plans are called the voters.
Well, for the
68 different elected officials.
Oh, you were talking about the elected official. I thought you were
No,
talking about.
it's really, no, I'm really not talking about the elected
You're
officials.
talking about the staff.
It's the staff.
And so with the staff, it's do we have them?
Every month, we recognize a significant number of employees who have 20,
Yeah, I heard that.
25, 30, 35, and a couple even 40 years of experience.
Right.
Our turnover is very low.
Great.
I think you just speak up.
That's both a strength and a weakness.
Well, indeed it is, right?
And an opportunity.
We'll just leave it here, though. Yes, sir.
It's the fact that we're a monopoly, basically. You can't go somewhere else and get your car tags or go file a death certificate or marriage certificate. So we have no competition. We're a monopoly. Is that all good?
See, that could get in the way of the way you think about customer satisfaction. You know, we're like we were when I was at Florida Power and Light when we first started doing this back in 1981. It was like, take it or leave it, customer satisfaction. You can only get your electricity from us. Mm-hmm. Next, I mean, and so you could be that way. So I guess that could be a.
And I don't think our people act that way, but it could.
So being a monopoly could be a weakness, right?
Could be a weakness.
But you know, you say that, and this could be an answer also to the tax department question. We've got grocery stores that you can go to and get your.
But you can't transfer titles there.
No, you can't. I mean but you can certainly do all the the routine stuff that you could do. We've outsourced that to where basically you can do that any time of day or night.
If your paperwork's all correct, you can get a license plate.
But aren't they doing that at our discretion? Or is it the state?
Well, it probably, no, it's at our discretion, but again, I think it's another way that we are providing good customer service.
So I think that, just back to the Florida Power and Light thing with me, we just did not provide good customer service because we didn't have to. And so I don't know if you are or aren't. I imagine we had good employees. It wasn't about our employees. It was the signal that we as managers were sending, you know. And so back to that thing we were talking about where, okay, when something wasn't open until 9, you said, you know, we need to move this back to 8. You need to be sensitive to things like that. Does it mean that the one that's at 5 o'clock needs to go to 6? I have no idea. It just means we need to be open to think about things like that, right? And so back to your point where this thing goes clank, that's not good. What can we do? I know, right. So I think the monopoly is a monopoly for a reason. The most efficient way to run the things you do is through a monopoly. But you can get arrogant or you can get uncaring of the customer. That's where the risk is. And again, I have no idea. but you can. Yes, sir.
I think one of our strengths is that relative to other counties around us here, neighboring counties, we do have a reputation for good service.
You do, okay. How do you, Tom, how do you know that?
People come in and tell us, they write us letters every day. It's
Okay,
an occurrence.
okay. So,
I hear from other departments similar comments.
so,
Plus, we have a reputation for innovation.
Tom's sitting at home writing those letters tonight.
To what, Roy?
We have a reputation for innovation.
okay. Tom, we know your handwriting, just so you know.
Innovation and collaboration.
And collaboration, yeah.
Now, how do we quantify that?
Yeah, that's,
Well, I
okay.
think you can quantify it by looking at our statistics as compared to other counties for similar types of services.
Right.
So the great news is you have good employees who are providing good service, good innovative service with good collaboration, but you don't necessarily have a way to prove it, or you don't have a brand where people know you do it.
That's
Great situation, right? You're good, but you can't prove it. Well, we can make it quantitative by finding out what's important and then asking people how we're doing and working on the weak spots. That's a quantitative, You do an or a customer satisfaction score, and you find out of the 5 top things, you're good at 4 of them, but this one here is not good. You start working on that. And then you have to do what you said, and that's people have to know, right? So wouldn't you rather be really good with good employees and just have to figure out how to measure it and how to promote it? And so maybe we need to improve our brand. That should be an opportunity.
And before we get too far down on that strengths list, that it goes to another page, without mentioning this, we've got very strong, progressive, collaborative leadership, both on this court, among the other elected officials, and department heads.
What were the words? Commissioner?
Strong,
Collaborative?
collaborative, effective,
Charming.
not always.
Who is that?
Experienced. Better word than old.
Fiscally responsible.
That pretty much covers the waterfront.
We have good leadership. We work well together.
I have seen commissions that didn't.
I can point you in some direction.
I've heard about some local ones that didn't, yes, right.
Look across the river over here and see that.
That's what I heard, yeah.
We have a pretty fast-growing county in terms of population and diversity. So that could be an opportunity. It could also be a threat.
Yeah, I was thinking that too when you were saying a threat. So, but let's put it in both places. Fast-growing and diverse population. So the question is, what are you doing to plan for the growth? Transportation and schools and all that kind of. Diverse, what are you doing to plan the social needs of the different diverse groups of it? So fast-growing and diverse population.
And tax base.
Okay.
We got shale too.
Sorry?
We have shale too.
Do you?
They were the first
Before-
shale that they
yes.
found.
Good for you.
You haven't
Oh,
done much
unfortunately, they
research on that, then.
Shrinking
They
is
better not borrow a whole lot of money on that shell.
They're very protective of that and of their financial
It
situation.
goes
right now.
away, trust me.
Yeah, does it?
State can't grab ours, it's sinking too fast.
Is the state legislature, can they be considered a threat?
Usually.
Focus Supreme Court in there with our Commissioner.
Other government entities.
Yeah.
State and federal government.
You can blame me for writing this one down.
Because when they look around and decide how they're going to balance their budgets, they often do it by pushing services down to the local level, and we're at the bottom of the hill.
Right. It's definitely one that I see every time. Now, what you can do about it, but it is definitely a threat.
State and federal, not local. State and federal.
Sorry.
Don't get too carried away with eliminating the city. What's that position we were looking
They
at
just
this
stuck
morning?
us with a position this morning.
Tom?
And cities. Okay.
Funding sources. Drop in revenue.
What about, you are one of the fastest growing areas in the nation, so, and maybe we picked it up here, but are there other ramifications of that we should specify, like transportation or?
Well, there are two ramifications of that. One is capital projects that includes transportation. And there is buildings in which we operate. And the other is, infrastructure. And the other is our human infrastructure, the services that we deliver to people. We're the local safety net. And to the extent that our population grows, not only does our capital infrastructure have to grow, but our people infrastructure has to grow as well.
So are those weaknesses?
No, those are more like threats.
It's not a weakness. It's an opportunity and a threat.
Okay, so.
The funding landscape in Texas is shrinking, but yet the needs for transportation and for other social services, including medical, is growing. So we have a huge gap. And usually local government, like county government, are expected to deliver the service to fulfill the gap. So to me, that's a threat because it's come from externally, and we can't really control it.
So capital projects around, like transportation, but others, need for additional services? And what was the human one that you said, Governor Brooks? I mean, Commissioner Brooks?
We have two kinds of infrastructure: capital infrastructure and human infrastructure. And to the extent that the population grows, you have to focus on both of those.
I did, I meant Commissioner, sorry.
Calm down, Steve. It'll be all right.
Yeah.
Political environment may be a threat.
You think?
He wrote that down.
You know, there's a lot of validity to the threat of the growth, because I grew up in Arizona. It took them 25 years to catch up infrastructure-wise. It has been a mess for 25, 30 years. And it was because, you know, nobody lived there, then all of a sudden we had this tremendous growth, and it was a very taxing,
Huge growth there.
oh, yeah, it was.
Currently today,
Y'all must not have had rail
there's
service.
1,500 people moving to the state of Texas every day.
Every day.
7 days a week, every day. So
Wow.
obviously, a percentage of that is coming to Tarrant County.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, take whatever 2 million is the percentage of the state's population, and, you know, we've got hundreds of people moving here every week.
So these are threats, and I guess we said they're also probably opportunities, right?
Yes.
Just like this one was both.
If we are prepared, then it could be opportunity.
Yeah.
If we're not,
Yeah, and we've all seen, like, Arizona's like one of the worst cases of it, where it came way too fast.
There are opportunities to get prepared.
How about politically? Any political risks that, you said it here, but I'm just anxious for me to know myself. What political risks are there that when you talk about that?
Depends on who you ask.
Equate us with the federal government. All they see in the media are things out of Washington, federal problems and all of that, and they think that the rest of it, they think our people are paid what the federal government's people are paid.
You can't get anything done either, right? That type of thing.
There's no comparison.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Something a little more specific is a majority of our court is going up for re-election. So you buy in this argument, it is possible, heaven forbid, I would say it's not going to happen, but it's definitely a threat that you could have 3 different people sitting there. I think that's 4, I guess. But I think the very structure of county government is inefficient with 68 elected officials.
But there's the document called the state constitution that prevents us from doing it.
Can't do much about that.
No, it can be changed.
There are studies that elected governments are more efficient and less prone to scandal than appointed governments.
Really?
Wilder, I can't believe that you've let this, can't believe you've let this slide all day, but we only have 67 elected officials, isn't that right?
As of today, we only have 6.
Yeah.
Getting better.
The governor will reappoint one shortly.
Is that a strength or weakness?
I'm not going there, I don't know.
Interesting.
Well, that ought to give you something to think about for a day or two.
Are we out of thoughts?
Natural disasters
Okay. So would what? Technology. Is technology a strength or a weakness?
Technology attack, like
Cybercrime. I got-
Business continuation would be the disaster.
Right. How is, speaking of technology, is that a strength or a weakness of the county?
It's a strength.
Our IT department, they'll tell you it's a strength.
I know, but I wanted to hear from you.
It's a strength.
It's a strength. We're considered one of the leaders in the state. Of course, there's room for improvement,
there's always room for improvement.
much room for improvement.
Sure, but question if you're not in the dark ages. Yeah.
Where would privatization of services, if we privatized some of the things that we did?
Opportunity.
Passport.
Commissioner Brooks is touching his mustache. That's a problem.
All right, let me push.
Outsource.
Pardon me?
Outsource it, yeah.
He's referring to public-private partnership.
Just outsource.
So let me push on that uncomfortable topic for a minute. What areas have been talked about for privatization? Have any?
We've privatized roads.
Okay.
Now, the county hasn't. but the state has.
State has?
County hasn't, but all. I don't, I guess we certainly got the authority to do that.
Okay.
But there are private roads in Texas that are tolled.
We can outsource the purchasing department, can we?
So in Houston, there's one of those, right?
Not by law.
Well, Terrence, well, for roads?
Mhm.
Well,
One of the toll roads there, right?
no, actually, they're
That one is owned by the
actually
county.
not private.
They're not private.
Yeah,
They're not private.
but we have them here, where we have what they call PP, public-private partnership.
And so you put tolls on those, and they can generate
Through
fees?
the North Texas Tollway Authority.
Okay.
Well, not really, but you've also got Central. What he's talking
That's-
about
I'm
is
talking about
Express.
I'm talking about, well, Austin is probably the best example right now that has operating privatized toll roads. Tarrant County has one that'll take effect after the first of the year, and they'll be charging tolls on it.
So would that help do this, address this?
No.
Well,
It's a state issue right now. On that, it's not really
okay,
our issue.
okay.
It's a way to finance that, some of that capital infrastructure, the transportation piece in particular.
It's a temporary fix. Right now, it's
50
viewed as a temporary fix to the transportation funding shortage.
But it reduces congestion,
Right.
improves mobility. So,
Quality of life,
got to pay for it.
sure. So I don't know if we're out of ideas. I wanted to get you to do one more thing before I let you loose. If you had to pick five up here, across the whole board, just 5 bullets that you thought should either be leveraged, addressed, think about what those would be, and then I want you to tell me, and I'll put little tick marks next to them. So if, in other words, I'm looking for you to help me prioritize a little bit. Which ones do you think are the 5 most important? And they're going to be different for all of you, of course.
I would say the feedback from the customer is one of my important ones. I wouldn't.
This one, this here, though, right?
Are you talking about the opportunities? Over
Well, no, it's across the board. So 5 across all 4. So
I like to see like a more of a
systematic approach.
focus in
Yep.
customer engagement.
Okay.
Not just getting feedback, but overall customer engagement.
Yeah, that's why I picked this one. It's a little more holistic than that one. That's a subset
Okay.
of this, right? So that's one of your 5. You got 4 more to go.
I'd say,
Go
The
ahead.
growth,
Growth?
it's not going to let up for a while.
Okay.
I think it's going to be with us for many decades.
Judge?
the one right on, understanding what we're going to try to do in the future.
Okay.
The branding?
Branding.
2 brandings.
We don't have that, or do we? Yeah.
It's right here, need to improve our brand.
So you want each one of us to pick our 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can do them randomly like this.
Put another one up there under understanding satisfaction. Yeah. And another one on the branding.
Financially strong.
Yeah, put 2 on there, I'll take that one.
Make it 3 as well?
Or
Yeah.
5?
Put 1 under the fast-growing part for me.
Over on the threat side, the 2 having to do with growth in maintaining, keeping up with growth.
These
by
2?
dealing with capital projects and human infrastructure.
Right.
Those 2, yeah.
Gotcha. Those are subsets of this, but you
Yes.
just want to point it out. Great.
But my last one's going to be under the great employees, and under that, I mean, maintaining, keeping, and achieving great employees. I mean, it's just it's all under staff development or
Right.
Maintaining and developing excellent employees.
Developing. You know, that's an example of an objective that might flow out of this process, right?
Yeah, put one on there for me too,
Yeah, me too.
because
Me three.
Yeah, I'll go.
we're a service organization primarily.
You got them wrong.
What did you say, Commissioner Wynn?
So we're a service organization.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I would view all employees as our number one asset.
Here, here.
But closely
So how do we-
related to that is the one about the aging of our employee
Right.
population.
Because that's a threat to that.
That's a threat to that.
You bet.
Absolutely.
So this is related to great employees.
Absolutely it is.
And the implication there is, like we talked about, some kind of a succession plan, right, for the departments that don't have it.
At least for critical positions.
Right, pinpointed to where it needs to be, right? We missed any? Now, you'll have the opportunity when we get together in about a month or whatever it is to add to this, but I wanted to get your initial thoughts.
Well, go ahead and add economic development opportunities as well, in the opportunity. Because along with...
You mean add one?
Added.
Gotcha.
Along with a growing population comes business opportunities.
Ben.
You could put a companion piece under strengths, strong business climate.
Okay.
When do you lose?
I'm going to adjourn before I lose.
5 minutes.
I'm going to adjourn before I lose.
You got 5 minutes.
I got the hammer. You got 25 dashes up there, not everybody's picking their 5 out.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 21. No, we only have 21. So, anybody have any other ones you feel strongly about? We have about 4 remaining. 5, 10.
I might if I could read them all, but I can't see them all from here.
You want me to read them to you? Be happy to?
I think our reputation is good.
That's a strong one, isn't it?
I think that's important.
Yeah. It's funny because that one's tied to this one, right? It is good, but we should quantify it, find out what we're not good at, and work on those. So, but you're right. That's really great that you are good. It's just people don't know you, or you don't have any way of quantifying.
We're known among our peers. We're known very well among our peers.
But I mean, known by the
But
citizens.
citizens
Our constituents.
and
Yeah.
customers, because they have no other means by which to evaluate us.
Right. Okay.
So you're talking about coming back in a month. I mean, are we talking about getting our schedules together? I mean, in a couple of weeks, when could we do this kickoff?
We're going to try to do this as quickly as possible. Now, I fully understand the posting piece, okay? And I think what Jack was talking about, there are several things that are going to occur before we come back in a month to talk to you all again. You all be involved in all this, but this type of a session.
But we're not waiting a month to have this kickoff.
No. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the activities. So today was intro and input from Commissioner's Court. And so.
And Tom.
And Tom. But Tom got lunch for that. I mean, come on.
He'd buy you lunch, put his name on there.
So this is.
What does everybody's calendar look like for the 16th?
So that's, the next thing up would be the kickoff, right? I mean, we're actually doing some gathering of input tomorrow.
Or something like that for
In the
breakfast.
morning, yeah.
7:30 to 9, then we
Or
have.
whenever, sometime that morning. I mean, I'd love to get the judges to be here a little bit longer than that, but I don't know whether is that a non-jury week by chance? Probably not.
What about Tuesday on a court day?
That is a Tuesday.
7:30 to
Oh,
9.
16th on.
It's 17th. 16th is on a Monday.
I think either one. I think we could do either one of those.
I mean, we're all gonna be here, I hope, on a court day.
We may not all be here at 7:30.
Do it at the family law.
I think either one of those days works for me.
So when I said about a month, I was really talking more about this. This is what you're focusing on right now, so
Yeah.
let's take a look at that and see.
2 weeks.
I'm good with the 16th or 17th.
See, this
If
is,
it's early in the
17th
morning.
save us a trip.
17th?
well, if you guys will hold those 2 days open, we'll see what the schedules are with the other elected officials.
16th and 17th, I can't. Those are, I'm sorry, I'm in Ohio those days with client.
Okay.
I can do the 23rd, 24th. Are you looking for like a Monday, Tuesday? Is that what you're looking for?
Well, a Tuesday's our court day, so that,
24th.
we were just saying we'd be here.
I can do next Tuesday. I can do the 24th. I can do the 1st. I just can't do the 17th.
10th is good.
10th is next week, but I don't know if is that too soon to let the elected
We'll
officials know?
need to, see, this is the scheduling issue. We can work our schedules, but now we're talking about schedules of a bunch of other elected officials also. And it's not necessarily the elected officials that are sitting here. You've got the bulk of our elected officials are judges.
24th would be better.
Let's see when they're
Give
open.
a little
when
space.
They may have an opening.
Well,
let's-
Let me ask you all, is any day of the week, if we do it early in the morning, is that a good time? I know if we can focus on a Tuesday when you're down here, that would be good, but
Tuesdays are good because we're pretty well assured on Tuesdays that we don't have anything that we pretty well can't cancel. And I mean, I think if we did the 10th, obviously, JD said the 24th, but if we had to, the 10th would work for me. I've got something at 7:30 that morning, but if the 10th would work, I could miss it.
I don't think getting all the other elected officials scheduled a week is enough time.
Probably not, but, it could be that they're open. We just did a quick poll of the 10th or the 24th,
And if they're not, what?
then we go to the
24th?
Then we pick the day that's got the most available, because otherwise we're going to be doing this time next year. And maybe just ask for a representative if they can't all be there, or maybe ask them to consider picking one person to represent their group, or as many of them come as can.
Well, I move for the 24th.
I have a lot of other days other than Tuesday. It's just that one I'm not. But if Tuesday's the best day, this would give us a little time to plan. Because we want each of you to have some kind of an integral part, right? But it's up to you. I can be here next Tuesday as well.
24th is good for me.
Is that okay? So between now and the 24th, we're going to try to do some meaningful things tomorrow.
Yes.
But other than that, we wouldn't do anything until the 24th, because that would be the official kickoff, right?
I think between now and the 24th, if 24th is the date, we have a lot of work to do as far as the messaging piece
Yes.
for the 24th.
Right.
The interaction that the individual court members might want to have with that elected group during that period, that type of deal. We need to make sure that once we get past that, get that kickoff, that we hit it, and I can get our department heads involved really pretty quickly on that.
So could we also talk about, because the department heads won't be nearly as difficult as this one, right?
That's the one that's the big one.
And the strategy session is as many of this group as wants to be involved, plus we talked about department heads,
Those will be yes.
plus even department heads that don't work for you.
Right, and those will be the focus groups, basically, of the grouping of elected officials.
Oh.
Is that what that is?
Oh.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, we just stopped this thing for 2 weeks with the kickoff. And 3 weeks. 3 weeks. That's right, 3 weeks.
One of the reasons that we wanted to, and I know that y'all want to be in attendance, we can give you a schedule when we might meet with the department heads. We told our department heads about this meeting and what was going to be covered, and the majority of them have been either watching it online or we have them here. Our goal was to create an environment for those individuals that they would feel comfortable talking with our consultants about their visions of the SWOT. Not necessarily the court's vision, but their visions of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so we could be, if we can release that schedule, and we can try to make sure that there's not at least, there won't be 3 people from the court there to meet when we do that. That way we would get that piece out of it. But I really think that the department heads have the basic foundation, what we talked about.
I understand, GK, but, I mean, you speak that as though the department heads, I see the elected officials, I mean, I see the department heads as critical of this too, but I see the elected officials being absolutely as critical as those of us around this table.
I never said they weren't, Judge.
Well, I understand that, but
All I'm saying
what we're
is-
basically saying is do you have a schedule? Have you already laid out a schedule in the next 3 weeks to meet with them, with the elected officials?
We had scheduled, not with the elected officials, but we set a schedule up for tomorrow to meet with some of the senior department heads. That those are internal to us, not other elected officials or appointed officials.
So could we have a kickoff including the elected officials?
That's who it's for.
I mean, and the staff, right?
Right.
On whatever date we pick. And so this gets, and then we break out the elected officials on the, later that day. And so this is all really one date in 3 weeks. And then this one here is whenever, and I'd like to kind of pinpoint a date for this when we get together for the actual session. So it sounds like we're talking about the hard to schedule ones, this one here and this one here. So if we did this on 9/24, then could we do this one on 9/30 or something like that, right? So we're not pushing it way back.
Probably.
So this one here was going to be, this kickoff was going to be for the senior staff, both that work for you, but also in other departments, the elected officials, and with contributions from each of the commissioners. And so these two are really the same thing, right? And so now once we have this, and we can get the input from the rest of the staff, maybe in between here and here, now we're ready for this session to say, yes, sir.
How much time are you talking about for that meeting? Because that's a court day. I mean, we were sitting here a minute ago talking 7:30 to 9. Okay, now, is that the time frame that you, because I would see this kickoff meeting as a kickoff meeting.
Yeah.
Explaining the process, kind of going through the big picture of it, and then later that day, if you want to meet with other people, but we're in and we're out. The judges, who have a much different schedule than we do, they're in at 7:30 to 9, then they're gone. And, I don't know. I think it's going to take some time to coordinate with the judges.
So let's say, to your question, let's say this is an hour and a half, 1.5 hour kickoff, like you said, whatever time it is. And so now the judges, the elected officials, the senior staff from outside of your department, they're all now understand what to expect, it's context and so forth. You're supporting this. Okay, now we have to, before we do this, we now have to solicit information from the elected officials and from the staff before we can do this. Staff, I think we can work that out. But with the elected officials, then the question would be, later that day, could we meet with them in a segmented group, or maybe the next day? So one thing we could do is we could kick this off one day, and you guys are gone at 9 o'clock, so are the judges, and then we meet with staff to get input. And then the next day, maybe it's 7 o'clock again.
Quite honestly, it's going to be easier for you probably to see if you can set up meeting with some of the other elected officials, the judges and some of those folks, because the staff, for the most part, are going to be in court too.
Oh, okay.
Your other elected officials are not necessarily required to be in court.
Okay.
But you're talking later on that afternoon. I mean, if we can set one up at 2 o'clock or something like that, and start that process.
So we have the hour-and-a-half kickoff that you were talking about, 7:30 to 9, everybody's gone. Now we have the official kickoff. Everybody knows how important it is, what to expect. We've got to get these folks and these folks before we do this one.
And we assume y'all can work that out.
Okay, so the question is, when might this be? If this is 9:24, this 1.5-hour kickoff is on 9:24, and like you said, we'll work out the details of the other one. This one here is now focusing back on this group. When could we do this one? Can be in October, because this is one of the things we were talking about, but
Well, I think it's important that our staff line up those other meetings that you want to do later that day or the next day, 24th, 25th,
right.
so that you have a meaningful trip other than you came here and talked for an hour and a half.
No, it can't be that way. Yeah, no,
know.
yeah, right. Yeah, I don't want to do that either.
And how long is it going to take you, once you get those strategy sessions done, to be ready for the development, the strategy session?
That won't take much time, because I'll take this and put it into an input document where we're ready to
A week
go.
later, you would be ready.
You bet. Could be. That's good for you. So like October, I don't know if that has to be a Tuesday or not, but October 1st.
Probably
It doesn't
need to be
have
able
to.
Pardon me?
It doesn't have to. We would prefer for it to.
But October 1st works.
But if it's, you don't have to be in the afternoon, because then at that point in time, it's going to take, we need to have more than a,
Now, we were talking about how many days, though, for this?
With the elected official and department heads, it's going to take at least 3 days, I think.
Okay, so, but this session itself, where we
About
take,
3 full days?
we take all the,
yeah.
Really?
And so the development of the strategy would probably be a day and a half or two.
right, so Commissioner Johnson, what we're talking about, I think, is for this, maybe a day and a half for this piece here. So after we get all the inputs, now we take the inputs as a group and we spend a day and a half on this.
I would think it'd be about a day.
So if we have October 1st, we have maybe the afternoon of October 1st and all day October 2nd or something like that.
Or what about September the 30th, which is a Monday, and October the 1st, which is a,
The problem driving that is when we can meet with those other elected officials, because that has to occur before we can come back as a group here. And so if we can't get that done, then we're going to have to push the develop the strategy session down. I mean,
Should we get a couple of dates from the group in here? Like, we heard September 30, October 1, but it's contingent upon what you said. Should we look at something like the week after that as well?
That next week is when they're gone. Lots of them are going to Galveston for the county judges.
Week of the 7th and 8th?
Week of the 7th, all week, yeah.
Okay. So maybe the week after that?
We just pushed this thing to the end of November, at least.
You get all this worked out and let us know when it's going to happen.
I can do that.
Is that okay with you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right, with me.
It's all right with me. Let's work it out, GK. We'll make it.
We can sit here and talk about this all afternoon and not make a decision.
Okay. We'll take it.
I think we got to realize that we may not get all the judges.
Understand.
Here, okay? We just get what we can get.
You think?
Yes, sir, I understand that.
Okay. So we're done unless you have any other questions or thoughts?
and who wants to be at least notified of when these meetings are being held?
Tomorrow, you mean?
Notified, but I won't be attending unless I'm required to be here.
We're going to notify the entire court.
Okay.
You're talking about tomorrow, right?
And to whom do we need to respond so you'll know whether or not you've got to post that meeting and we don't have 3 people show up?
Respond to me.
No big deal to post it anyway,
Well, we can't post the one tomorrow.
but those are department heads.
So what time are we meeting with who tomorrow?
You didn't want to be at those meetings you weren't required to be at.
Do what?
Said you didn't want to be at those meetings you weren't required to be at.
Well, you and I have 11 o'clock, and I've got a 1 o'clock.
I know.
So, yeah.
That's why I'm just saying, send us the list so that we can respond. What time are your meetings tomorrow?
We're going to start at 9 o'clock, and we're just going to work through the day.
Because from my purposes, I'm going to have, if I'm not there, somebody from my staff will be there.
I won't be there tomorrow.
Okay.
Nor will I.
He needs 2 more volunteers, I
Yeah.
think is what he's looking for.
And the key is to make sure we create an environment where that our staffs can
Sick us
speak
won't be
freely.
there.
Because we're seeking, in these staff meetings, we're seeking their input on SWOT. Everybody gets inputs on SWOTs.
GK, I understand that. But this is a strategic planning, and if they're going to be bashful about talking, then they ought not be there.
So there's a meeting from 9 to 11, which kind of introduces this to all the folks, Judge. And then there are meetings like at 11, 11:30, 12, 12:30, 1. And we've got a list of them here if you want to see them.
2:30. So I need to wait another.
We'll just publish that this afternoon.
Okay.
We'll send it out.
This came from Megan.
We're adjourned.
Thank you very much.
And everybody that betted on the under.
I won.
No. I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. Let's not get amnesia. Pay up.
It was over and under. You had what time?
See you, sir. Nice to meet you, too. Thank you very much.